Good evening, everyone. If everyone can make their way to their seats, we will call the meeting to order at 5:04 p.m. Roll call, please, Ms. Amaker.
President Weinstein,
Present.
Vice President Wallach,
Here.
Clerk Wood,
Here.
Trustee Kelly,
Here.
Trustee Kermode,
Here.
Trustee Napier,
Here.
Trustee Scott,
Here.
Superintendent Larson Everson,
Present.
and I'm Idalia Amaker.
Thank you, Adalia. At this time, I would like to invite Claire Rea, principal of Tompkins Elementary, to come up to the podium and guide us in the flag salute and the moment of silent reflection. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Claire Ray, the principal at Tompkins. I should say the proud principal at Tompkins. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Okay, moving on to item 2 is approval of the agenda. Do we have any discussion, comments on tonight's agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Kelly, make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 3, general function. We'll start out tonight, as always, with a superintendent update. Superintendent Larson Everson.
Thank you, President Weinstein. Good evening, board and staff and community members. Good to see everybody here this evening. We will go ahead and get started with tonight's update and start with sharing the good. We're still working, capturing kids' hearts as a district. And I do want to mention and send out a thank you to our teachers and staff who presented and attended training yesterday on our non-student day. It was a professional development day with training offered in capturing kids' hearts. So we're really proud of the work that's going on there. And as you know, capturing kids' hearts, one of the tenets or strategies that we use is to share the good. So this is something that we model across our leadership and in our classrooms, and we do it here too. And the way that we do it here is sharing the good is with our hoorays. So I have a few hoorays this evening, and we're doing a little transitioning so that the person who sent me their hooray gets to read their hooray, so you don't have to hear as much of my voice going forward. So we have a few hoorays this evening, and we're going to start with Miss Ray, if she can come on up to the microphone and share her Tompkins hooray.
With the introduction of Capturing Kids' Hearts and the goal of using these strategies to elevate relationships with students and foster a safe and supportive classroom culture, Ms. Freeman also implemented the practice of community circles. She has seen cafeteria behavior continue to improve, and her students are learning how to respectfully handle moments of conflict. We are grateful to Capturing Kids' Hearts for giving us new ways to reach students and foster a sense of family at Tompkins.
One thing we all forgot, after they share hooray, what do we do?
Hooray!
All right, thank you, Miss Ray. Hooray for Tompkins. Let's go to the next slide, please, and I'd like to invite Principal Libatique up to the microphone.
I'm guessing it gets more spirit in the classroom with the hoorays.
I think so.
So our counseling department has been working with our teaching staff to increase the rigor in our course offerings, and the following courses have been added to our A through G, which is our college prep course list. So ASB is now a G elective. Yearbook is an F elective, which is our visual and performing arts. Ceramics is an F elective. Woodworking, advanced woodworking, those are both F electives. And then computer literacy, construction and maintenance technology, and robotics are all G electives. And so this is to open more doors for students, to give them more opportunities to be A through G eligible.
Hooray!
Very good, thank you. Next slide, please. I'd like to invite Dr. DeFrancis.
So the special education department, I'm just going to go ad-lib because I can't read it that far. Certified under crisis prevention and intervention training, 32 new individuals. So hooray.
Hooray!
Thank you, Dr. DeFrancis. And one more, Mr. Lowe, JMS.
For the first time in many years, Jacobson Middle School's first group of 8th graders are at Camp Keep this week. They're exploring, camping, hiking, and engaging in hands-on science. And as far as I've heard, none of them have gotten hurt yet. So hooray.
Double hooray. Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Next slide, please. So through my presentations as we've started this school year, I've shared a little bit of information about capturing kids' hearts. We've talked about the hoorays, the social contract. We talked about affirmations, I think, last month, and just wanted to share a few minutes to talk about body language, because this is a very important part of how we communicate with students. You may be aware that most experts agree that 70 to 93% of all communication is actually nonverbal. So when we talk about nonverbal includes, I have them listed up there on the slide, body language, facial expressions, posture, gesture, and eye contact, right? So it's not just in the words that we use, but it's how we say things, it's how we look when we say things, and a very big part of the strategies in capturing kids' hearts is having kids feel welcome when they come to school and when they come into the classroom. So we want to make sure that not only our words are, are welcoming, but that all of our nonverbal communication is welcoming as well. So we can go to the next slide. I have a few examples for you. So when we talk about, welcoming kids at the doorway in our classrooms, we focus on squaring up. So you can see in the two pictures, and the one that's on the right, the teacher is kind of angled away from the student, but the picture on the left, the teacher or staff member is squared up with the student, welcoming them into the classroom. So this is an important part, again, of body language and how we reach our students. The bottom two pictures just mention open posture, that again, if you were welcoming somebody and saying, welcome, good morning, but we have our arms closed, it's not the same sentiment as standing there with an open body posture and we're saying those words welcome. So just being aware of these things as we continue to work with students. And then if you can go to the next slide. The top one shows the teacher leaning in a bit. And I want to caution, because you can lean in too much, right? We don't want to make somebody feel uncomfortable when we're having a conversation, whether because we're standing or sitting, by leaning in too much. But leaning in a little bit shows that we're anxious to see them, anxious to hear what they have to say, and happy to see them. And then the next one is just eye contact. We all know about eye contact, whether we're talking with our kids, our spouse, coworkers, that it's very distracting and doesn't feel as genuine when someone's looking away or looking at their watch to see what time it is. So, welcome, hope you're having a good day. That wouldn't be as good of a look from the teacher as looking the student in the eye and saying, welcome, I'm really glad you're here today. It's good to see you. And then the last thing, I didn't put a picture there because it's hard to put a picture for respond, but it's really important that we model for our students that when they say something to us, that we respond, that we're acknowledging that we've heard them. So even if I were to say, "Good morning, Trustee Wood," and she said, "Good morning," I would say, "Good to see you today." I add on a little something. It's not just I said something, she said something, leave it, right? We want to respond when students are responding and engaging with us. So just gives you a little bit of information about the strategies for capturing kids' heart. On the surface, they seem very simple, but there's a lot of intentionality behind ensuring that our students feel welcome and that we're fully implementing the strategies to the best of our abilities. Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk about enrollment for a minute. As we do traditionally, on the right-hand side of the column is the information or data reflecting week 8 for this school year. And the left column is the data from last school year. You'll see there's some funny information there in the middle when it relates to TILA. And I wanted to walk you through that just a little bit because last year, before we had a separate CDS code for TILA, it wasn't considered a separate school. So the kids who were enrolled in TILA as a program were actually enrolled in their school of attendance based on their residence location. And that's different from this year because TILA is its own school. So the kids that are enrolled in TILA for grades TK through 8 are enrolled in TILA. Now, our high school students, grades 9 through 12, that are participating in some independent study, their enrollment shows in Tehachapi High School. So that's why those numbers, I wanted to point that out. And then, of course, adult ed, that's not counted in our TK through 12 numbers. But if you look at our totals of TK through 12, as of the end of week 8, we were up 81 students, comparing those two timeframes. Okay, next slide, please. Just a quick look at attendance. I think it's looking very positive. This attendance data is from week 7. And as we continue to see a positive trend upward in attendance improvement for week 7, we have an increase of more than 5% over the same week for last year. So I think although we started pretty heavy with COVID at the start of this school year, things have certainly leveled off and attendance is improving, and that's a great thing to see, both for staff and students. Thank you. Next slide. So I wanted to follow up on a question from the last meeting. If you recall, at our September board meeting, I shared some data and provided some indicators related to students' academic progress, as well as social emotional learning. And I was asked, I believe it was President Weinstein, who asked specifically for the comparative data from the Panorama survey from 2022 with 2020. And when I presented the data at the last meeting, all of the areas had a comparison except for growth mindset. And the reason for that being is in 2020, that was the first year that we implemented Panorama, we did not collect growth mindset data. So at that time, excuse me while I just grab my document here. At that time, we were measuring 3 of the same things: the supportive relationships, self-efficacy, but we, at that time, were looking at challenging feelings. And for this current survey and for the remainder of this year and for next year, we're measuring growth mindset because we feel that that is an important quality to know where our students stand with that aspect. So that's why there was no comparative data on that particular item. I did share at the meeting last month what the percentile rankings were for all of the areas: supportive relationships, growth mindset, self-efficacy, and positive feelings for all of the groups, our primary and our secondary students. But for growth mindset, we don't have a 2020 comparison. So just wanted to clear that up. We could go on to the next slide. Talk about homecoming just for a minute. I know that many of you were involved and present for some of our homecoming festivities, and I want to say thank you to our Tehachapi High School staff, students, and parents who made the whole homecoming experience come back to life this year for our students. There was a lot of creativity and energy that went into the creation of the class floats, and it was extra special because our Warriors had a win that night for our homecoming game. Overall, it was very exciting and uplifting to see the return of such a traditional activity and all the things that circle around homecoming, and just truly just to get to see our students having such a good time and enjoying themselves and making memories. Next slide, please. Hooray! Little sports update for you. There's lots of pictures up there. I'll give you a quick rundown. The Varsity Warrior football had a great homecoming game, as I just mentioned, against South, taking the win 26-20. Our JV Warriors also enjoyed a big win over South with a 34-6 victory. Lady Warrior Volleyball has enjoyed 4 consecutive victories. Well, as of the time that I wrote this, I'm not up to date on, I think there may be a match going on today. Yeah, as we speak. But as of last Thursday, they beat West 25-13, 25-19, and 24-14. Our cross-country Warrior athletes recently competed in the Wasco Invitational with fantastic results, and 7 Warriors earned individual medals with their outstanding runs. Our Lady Warrior Tennis is also having a great season and is positioned to possibly take the South Yosemite League Championship, so that's very exciting. And just also wanted to mention our JMS Bulldogs, who've been in action on the volleyball courts, and the 8th grade team has a record of 5-0, and 6th and 7th grade team record of 1-4. So congratulations to all of our athletes, and hope they keep having good seasons. Next slide, please. Just want to remind everybody that the latest edition and the first one for this school year of the TUSD School News is out. There's some at the back of the room if you don't have one. I've placed one at each of your seats here for board members. You can also access the school news on our TUSD website. There's a link, and there's an audio podcast for my article as well. But I really want to thank all of our team members for contributing their articles. They have to take time out of their busy days to think of what they want to share with our community and families, and they do a great job, and it's nice to be able to share this information consistently with our families here in Tehachapi. So thank you. Next slide, please. So our boardroom bulletin boards are brought to us this evening by Golden Hills Elementary, and I'm going to welcome Mrs. Bailey, principal of Golden Hills, up here, and she will introduce her support team members, and she will share some information with you about the bulletin boards and the areas of focus this year at Golden Hills.
Okay. Good evening, Superintendent Larson Everson and members of the school board. And I will be introducing my team. They're each going to be speaking, but I'm going to wait until the time in the presentation to do that, if that's okay. Thank you for giving us some time this evening to give you an update on several of the good things happening at Golden Hills. So to begin with, we were also given the opportunity, as Superintendent Larson Everson said, to decorate the boardroom bulletin boards. What you will see on the boards is the writing process using right from the beginning the program at first, second, and fifth grade levels. I will be talking a little bit more about our writing focus at Golden Hills a little later in the presentation. But if you would, next slide. Yeah, there you can see some of the samples from the bulletin board, and I'd encourage you to get it, take a peek when you have a chance. All right, but before we get into that, I'd like to introduce our newest member of the Golden Hills administrative team, our Vice Principal, Elizabeth Spoden. She goes by Liz, and I'll let her introduce herself to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Liz Spoden, Elizabeth Spoden. I just want to say how grateful and thankful I am for this wonderful opportunity here at Golden Hills Elementary. I'm just looking forward for wonderful years to come, and just very excited to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Liz. So we are focusing on 4 specific areas this year, and we'll be updating you on each of these areas this evening. We have capturing kids' hearts as a focus, along with the rest of the school district. And we have right from the beginning. We are also focusing in on math instruction this year and our intervention program. As you know, Capturing Kids' Hearts is being implemented district-wide. Teachers have created social contracts in their classrooms, and we're all focused on the Excel model. So for the Excel model, we engage. That's the first piece. We greet and warmly welcome students, staff, and visitors, and we're very intentional about this. We also explore, meaning we listen and attend to personal, emotional, and academic needs of students and each other. We empower. That means we're empowering students and staff to use the strategies we're teaching them, and we're giving them opportunities to do so. And then we launch. We end the day and we end meetings on a powerful and positive note. Our school climate is our primary focus at Golden Hills Elementary. We're working hard at building relationships with one another and with our students. One thing I've personally started this year is making time for lunch once a month with a certificated and a classified staff member. I actually got this idea from Tracy Mangeris, who did that for years. So names are drawn randomly, but it's one more thing that I'm doing to get to know my staff on a deeper level, and it's been a really, really good thing. So these are some of the social contracts that are up in the classrooms. And the kids sign their names to them. And then here's some pictures of morning greetings. So the kids get to pick the way that they want to be greeted. That usually the teachers give them a choice, whether they want a fist bump or a high five or a hug. All right. So in addition to capturing kids' hearts, we're focusing on right from the beginning. As one of the original trainers of teachers for Right from the Beginning for our school district, I have always been passionate about this program and all it can do for students when used consistently. We've worked at it continuously in our district and at our site, but with limited professional development time in the past years and a rapidly changing staff with retirements and influx of new teachers, it's been really challenging to get everyone trained. However, now we have early release professional development days, and we also have Pump It Up time. And with those structures in place, we're moving forward and we're gaining ground and implementing the program with students. And I'm really grateful to Kim Ross and Terry Boston, who's a coach here at the district office, who are supporting this endeavor at our site. It goes without saying that this program, like any program, has better outcomes when it's done collectively. So it's really important that we do get everyone on board. And here are the benefits that this program provides to students. So it helps students develop their ideas and organize their thinking prior to writing. It develops critical and creative thinking skills. It prepares students for proficient written response, both in literary and informational text, and that's really important on our CASP testing. It develops critical writing skills necessary for success in college and the workforce, and it builds a whole school culture for effective writing with shared responsibility and a developmental approach. So each grade builds on the previous grade. And it increases comprehension of content and improves literacy skills. So here are some samples from the classroom. All right, next slide. All right, now I will turn it over to our fabulous learning director, Jennifer Carr, and she will be talking to you about our math focus and our intervention program this year.
Thank you, Mrs. Bailey. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Larson Everson, and members of the public. As Mrs. Bailey mentioned, my name is Jennifer Carr, and I am the learning director at Golden Hills. So thank you for your time this evening. As Mrs. Bailey mentioned, one of our foci is on math instruction. So this year we have leveraged and set up structures to support with math instruction. Some of those structures include Pump It Up collaborative meeting times. These are weekly grade level meeting times where teachers can work collaboratively to engage in professional learning opportunities, to engage in collaborative planning, data-driven dialogues, and then really use that content to inform their instruction. We also have opportunities for teachers to sign up for demo lessons and co-teaching opportunities where I, as a learning director, support them. I've also offered to go cover classrooms so that teachers can observe others and learn from their colleagues because we have a wealth of expertise at our school. We will be starting up coaching cycles where teachers can sign up for more intensive one-on-one coaching where we dive into an area of growth that they have identified, a goal that they would like to work on. We also have after-school workshops as well as learning walks, where I support teachers and we walk around classrooms around the campus and really gain some strategies from their colleagues. So as you'll see, we are working hard to have a cohesive and comprehensive professional learning plan to support math instruction, where in those Pump It Up meetings, teachers are getting the same content, the same message, but we're also trying to personalize with some of the coaching cycles, the learning walks, and individualize for where teachers have identified they would like to grow. And specifically, some of the best practices in math instruction we are exploring are number talks. These are routines that help students develop number sense, conceptual understanding, mental math fluency, as well as flexibility with their math thinking. One of our school and district-wide focuses is academic student discourse. So we are exploring strategies like talk moves, math language routines, and accountable talk strategies to support students in developing a deep understanding of mathematics. Lastly, we are partnering with KCSOS to support teachers in the use of manipulatives, and we are purchasing additional manipulatives to support deep conceptual understanding of mathematics. Next slide, please. Thank you, Mr. McKay. So here are a couple of pictures from our recent Pump It Up meeting where we discussed effective use of number talks. Many of our teachers had previously been trained in number talks, so we took it to a deeper level and talked more about honing in our skills as facilitators of number talks. Teachers also had an opportunity to then sign up to either co-teach with me or sign up for demo lessons. Some teachers were risk takers and invited me in to observe and provide feedback as they facilitated a number talk lesson. Next slide, please. I'll also be talking about our intervention program at Golden Hills. We are working hard to develop a comprehensive and systematic approach to intervening and getting our students where they need to be. The response to intervention RTI model consists of 3 tiers of support. So we are strengthening our Tier 1 core instruction, the instruction that all students receive in their classroom, through data-driven dialogues during Pump It Up time, as well as many of the professional learning opportunities Mrs. Bailey and I mentioned previously. Our school has worked hard to establish a Tier 2 win time, what I need. During this time, classroom teachers are providing small, either individual or small group intervention based on what they're seeing the need is. This is also the same time that our Tier 3 intervention students are pulled out of the classroom and receive intervention in either reading or math with our intervention specialist, Kim Ross. This year and towards the end of last year, we were able to hire an additional paraprofessional to support RTI. So we have our intervention specialists and now a total of 2 paraprofessionals. So we are able to increase the percentage of students that we are servicing through the RTI program. So we are now at 12% of students who are being serviced. And we're grateful to be able to offer that as we've seen a greater need for intervention as a result of the pandemic. Next slide, please. I'm going to pass it back to Mrs. Bailey so she can also share a little bit about intervention in action. Thank you.
All right, so we have an awesome team at Golden Hills in every area, but we are super excited to have Kim Ross at the helm of our RTI program. She's as a teacher, really been passionate about using data to identify gaps in student learning and then fill those gaps. So she's very conscientious and very motivated, and she, you can see the paper up there says SMART goals. She's worked with each of the students in the RTI program on their own goals. So they're involved in the process of what they need to work on and setting goals for themselves and working on achieving those goals. So we're very excited about that. And we just want to say thank you for allowing us to share a little bit about what we're working on at Golden Hills. And I'd like to add that it feels really nice to be enjoying a traditional, productive, and positive school year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bailey, Mrs. Carr, and Ms. Spoden. Really appreciate the time and thought that you put into your presentation this evening. So we're almost going to wrap it up on superintendent update. There's a photo up here from our last Sippin' with the Soup, which was held on October 4th. We had a really great turnout. This was first thing in the morning at 7:30. We also already had some good conversations going. But also want to remind everybody that the next Sippin' with the Soup will be held on Tuesday, November 1st at Conan's Bakery from 7:30 to 10 a.m. And of course, everyone is welcome. Next slide, please. Here's a list of upcoming dates and events. Just wanted to share this with you, including some sporting events and other things that we're looking forward to here in the district. And if you look on the bottom, that is our next board meeting, which is scheduled for November 8th, right here at 5 p.m. So that concludes my update for this evening. Thank you again, team members, for your contributions, and I will turn it back to you, Mrs. Weinstein.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next, we have the TAT update. Welcome, Ms. Bowman.
Thank you, President Weinstein. Good evening, President Weinstein, members of the board. Ooh, is that me? Superintendent Larson Everson, and members of the public. October is a waiting month for TAT. It's the start of all upcoming holidays because they're all being introduced in the store this month, from Halloween to New Year's. But for TAT, it's really a getting ready month. That's a more appropriate way to describe this time of the year. TAT and the DO will head to the bargaining table starting October 19th and will continue negotiations until they are complete. We've spent a lot of time and energy building trust and communication bridges, so it is our hope that negotiations will go smoothly. School board elections will follow in November. It's exciting to see all the candidates running for positions, and thanks to everyone for giving your time and supporting students and staff. That being said, TAT appreciates all the time and effort the school board members have put in over the years, into your jobs. And it isn't said enough, but it is appreciated, so thank you very much. In the meanwhile, we just wait. On a side note, and this is not a TAT, this is me as athletic director, our JMS volleyball teams are doing pretty well. The 8th grade team has not lost a match, and the 6th and 7th grade team, they're building their skills. They have a lot of 6th graders on the team. Our next home game is going to be the 20th of this month, starting at 4 p.m.-ish, and you are all more than welcome to come. All right, have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. Next up is our CSEA update. Do we have an update this evening? Okay, moving on to item 4, the PTO update. PTO update? Welcome, Ms., and I'll probably say your last name wrong, Drogi, got it. Welcome.
Thank you. So I was invited to give a PTO update for Cummings Valley Elementary. This is my first year as the PTO president for our school. All of our members are new this year, so we're really trying to rally parent support. That's our number one focus. We all jumped in at a very difficult time for our PTO. But we're very excited that we have our new amazing principal. We're all super grateful for her. She has given us so much hope as parents. I never planned to be the PTO president, but after some issues last year, I spoke up to Ms. Mangeris, and we're just starting from the ground up. So we're all really trying to rally. I was hoping to meet some other PTO presidents tonight. I could really use the support, ideas, and really just kind of shadow them. That would be appreciated. So I'm looking forward to the monthly meetings that will be held and looking forward to attending those. What we're working on right now is we did just get a couple field trips on the calendar. We have our TK that are going to get to go to a pumpkin patch at Mountain Bible. We also have our first graders who are going to the Bright Creek, so they're really excited about that. Our kinders couldn't make the trip this year, so we're taking a pumpkin patch to them. So we're actually planning that right now. We also have Red Ribbon Week, which we just put together. That's going to be the 24th through the 28th. So we've rallied community members. We're going to have firefighters. We're going to have some CCI. We're going to have police. And they'll be there passing out treats to the kids who wear their bracelets that week at school. We have a poster decorating contest the kids get to participate in, and a pizza party for the class that wins. We actually just passed out pumpkins today after school to all of our teachers. Albertsons graciously donated 35 pumpkins to our school to do a school-wide pumpkin decorating contest. The classes per grade will win a popsicle party. So we're just really trying to bring in some fun field trips. Our 5th graders are going on a field trip. November, we're going to focus on some fundraising. So this morning, we also hosted a meeting for fundraising ideas, and we have some amazing parents that are going to step up and really push forward with that. We are going to try and do a huge family ball, a winter ball. So we're hoping to do that right after the new year. December is usually a busy month, so we'll also be doing the holiday hangout. We're going to bring that back. Pam, sounds like it was pretty amazing in the previous years, and the kids really look forward to that. So after school, they'll get to engage in different stations and fun things there. So that's what we're working on with our PTO and just trying to get the parents engaged. We have great support from our principal and vice principal and our school secretary, Pam. She's just been amazing, and she's just a wealth of knowledge for all of us new members. So we appreciate being able to come together and really try our best to do what we can for our kids and all of our students. So thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate the school's PTOs and hope that we can hear more from them at meetings. Item 5 is board communication. Anyone like to share anything? Nope. Okay. Moving on to public comment. As always, public comments are allowed. The board president will recognize any member of the audience wishing to speak on items not on the agenda. If it's on the agenda, please put your comments with the agenda item. That's always easier for us to keep it in our head where it goes. Need to be directly related to school business pursuant to Board Bylaw 9323. The board will limit comments to no more than 3 minutes per person. As I said, comment will also be allowed on specific action items prior to taking action. The president may allot time to those wishing to speak. No action is taken on matters presented, and no discussion of non-agenda items occurs at this time. If appropriate, the president or any member of the board may direct that the matter be referred to the superintendent's office for placement on a future agenda. And we do have some public comment. Let's see. Let's start with Mr. Schlosser. Good evening, Jay.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Larson Everson. Many of you guys know me. I've spent many years sitting on that side of the countertop, so I wanted to first start by thanking you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight, and wanted to give you a commitment. Having been on that side of the counter, I've been really diligent as I've been thinking about what to say to you guys about wanting to make sure that it was edifying. It is very easy to stand up here and pass on my concerns in a manner that's not edifying to staff or to the board members, and that's not my goal tonight in any way, shape, or form. I think that really what I want to bring to you guys is a policy level action, something for you guys to consider as a board long term, because the times are changing about the way we educate children. So my situation is this: I have a senior at THS. And just as a brief history, my concern is about the material that they're receiving educationally at school, specifically related to being shown R-rated movies with highly explicit material. nudity, sexual content, violence, profanity in large doses. It started last year in his 11th grade class, in which we received what I nominally call a reverse permission slip from the teacher the day before a graphic R-rated movie was intended to be shown, and the reverse permission slip was permission to not watch the movie, given to my student the day before the class. So I contacted staff and met with staff to voice my concerns about it, because again, I don't feel like often this is the better venue for something like that. And I received a commitment that that permission slips, proper permission slips, would go out in the future for anything of that nature. I guess I kind of thought that what I would have gotten was a commitment that we wouldn't show graphic R-rated content to our students at all. That kind of, for me, feels like the policy level decision I'm going to ask you to consider tonight. But I accepted that, okay, permission slips should solve this problem. So fast forward, I'm in 12th grade now. I receive a syllabus for a class intending to show 4 movies over the course of the year, all of them R-rated. I've included an email exchange that I had, and I provided it to you along with an IMDb, which is the Internet Movie Database that shows a parental guide for all of the 4 movies that are listed. I'd ask you to peruse it. It lists item by item the material that's in the movies that were shown in the syllabus. And so I had waited for the permission slip. I then find out that my son went to class and viewed one of the movies, including graphic nudity, extensively for the course of one period. So then again, I contacted staff via email. I included that email that I listed in there, and I received a response from the teacher. I'm not going to go through it in detail. I do ask you to consider reading it, please. I was a little surprised by the response, and we'll just decided not to go through it with you guys tonight. Moving forward, I just, with that kind of as the background of the situation we're in, I'm disappointed as a parent to be in this position. You know, and I think that we're in this position because, again, the times are changing. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was a kid, this didn't happen at school. Teachers didn't even try to show graphic material to students. It wasn't an issue, so there didn't need to be a policy against it. It just didn't happen. And now, today, a lot more modern thought in school is that at younger and younger ages, we need to challenge students with, if I'm being generous to the thinking here, that we need to challenge students with complex thought so that they can mature, that somehow the schools have a role in doing that at this stage. In the letter, you'll see in the response that I got, that's there. That's what I got back from the teacher was, hey, he's almost an adult, so this is okay. That's not my opinion. And so I want to say this, though. I can and do appreciate teachers who are passionate about what they do. This teacher is. My student likes this teacher. But that ought not run afoul of reasonable parental expectations. The two should not be in conflict with each other. And the reason is simple. This is compulsory education. I'm required to send my student to school. This is not the place to challenge their thoughts on sexuality and the visual intake that they get. This is just challenging them in difficult thoughts. American literature has been a wonderful source for challenging people about complex adult thoughts that we teach our children. But college is the place where you get to choose where you go and what you're going to learn, and that's where maybe more controversial topics belong. So my request is simple. I'd like the board to agendize this topic for the next meeting and consider a simple resolution of the board doing 2 things. One would be that all explicit material R-rated or above shall be formally approved by administration at a principal or above position, and that 2, permission slips shall be sent a minimum of 10 days prior to anything being shown to our students in the classroom and obtained 5 days prior to that event back, meaning there's an expectation that permission slips will be sent, they will be returned, or the material will not be shown. I think that's simple. I feel like that's something that maybe 20, 30 years ago just was a given, but now it's not a given. And that's okay, life's changing. So I know how this works. I know you guys can't, you can't agree to my idea, but you can agree to agendize it for the next meeting, and I'd be happy to explain any further thoughts that I have or communicate with you guys. My email address is contained in what I gave to you if you wanted to hear from me about it further. But I would like to actually ask President Weinstein if you or Dr. Larson Everson would like to make the commitment to agendize this tonight before I sit down. So that concludes my thoughts. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jay. And Superintendent, will you please make a note that we look at this for a future agenda item? Cannot guarantee you the next meeting. And then clarification on the 2 points to make sure we actually understand what you're asking for the agenda. If you could work with the superintendent, she'll reach out and we'll put that together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not thinking of a law here, but
Does anyone else?
a policy or something like that, so there's clarity for your teaching staff.
Does anyone else want to comment?
Well, last month there was a little bit of discrepancy on a verbal request. So I think someone on this board should make the commitment to provide a email to the superintendent with specifics on this. I'd be happy to do that in addition to Jay's comments, but I think it should start with, what I'm saying is if I'm going to make this email request formalizing this process as well, it would be something to the effect of what is our existing policy? Let's see, is there a policy, right? Let's start with that. And then the board can discuss based upon Jay's comments and points, then we can see maybe there is a policy in place, maybe there's some holes or some gaps that we should, discuss and fill those holes in, based upon the comments that Jay has made. So what I don't want to do is this verbal request to be vague, and then we come back next month and we go, dang it, that didn't really satisfy what we as a board had intended to see. So either we clarify it now and we get consensus in writing, someone type something up as a request now as a board, or someone take the lead and provide something in direction to the
I was
superintendent.
actually going to ask Mr. Slosser if he would start the ball by sending those 2 items in an email to the superintendent so that that dialogue could begin. So we do have it in writing per our bylaw.
Excellent.
If that is
I'm
okay
happy
with
to do
you.
that, and I have your, we've
Yeah, absolutely.
communicated many times, so no problem.
Perfect.
Happy to do that, and I appreciate you guys hearing me out on this again. You'll see in the email, there's more data there, but I really do want you guys to know my heart on this and I know I've told Stacy this, and forgive me for using your first name. Anyway, but we need passionate teachers. We need the next generation of teachers to step up and to be passionate about our students. My child, I just feel like that maybe some of the things we took for granted in the past need to be reinforced, that this is still compulsory education of minors and there need to be some boundaries there. So anyway, I hope you guys can respect that. Thank you for your
So we
time.
will start that, and I think Trustee Wallace
I
had
have
a
one
comment.
question.
Yes, sir.
What's the minimum age for R-rated movies that they recommend?
Well, 17 is, I looked up the MPAA rating system because I'm an engineer and that's what I do. And technically, the MPAAs, the whole rating system's not law in the United
No,
States.
it's recommended.
So technically, there's no law that says that you can't show an R-rated movie to a child. But they advise 17 as the age, or is it 17 and under? I'm not entirely certain. But if you take a look at the material that's in some of these movies, I think you'll agree they're not borderline R-rated movies. Some of them were, and I understand the syllabus, some of these movies may have changed. You'll see that in the email. I didn't know that. Apparently the syllabus changed because maybe some other parents have complained about this particular subject. I didn't know that until I received the email back. But some of the movie choices were ones, like I'm not a prude. I would never watch some of these movies. Some of them were shocking to me, so.
I believe some of the X-rated movies in the past are now R-rated. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's my personal feeling, is that, that bar has been lowered in the last 30 years, but anyway.
Okay, so.
Mr.
we'll-
Slosser, I'll look forward to connecting with you.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start that.
President Weinstein, I have a.
Oh.
And it doesn't need to be for you, but I appreciate it. What's the actual catalog title of this class, and if it's an elective or a requirement?
We'll put that together with,
Thank you.
before we consider agenda sizing it. Thank you. Okay, other public comment, we have Mr. Kaminsky.
Good evening. I was going over board policies as it pertains to board members. And through no fault of anyone in this room, under bylaw 9220, it says, each board member shall reside within the trustee area that he/she represents, but shall be elected by all voters in the district. I believe the California Voting Act that was talked about this summer, that's not correct, needs to be changed. And then under bylaw 9230, as early as possible during the election or appointment of board members, one or more orientation sessions shall be held. The superintendent's been kind enough to invite the candidates, before the election, to an orientation Friday, October 21st. I have a previous family commitment, and I would advise in the future that those be held on a non-board meeting Tuesday, since anybody running for the board has to be available on at least the second Tuesday of the month. And then further in that, it says, in addition, the superintendent or designee shall provide incoming board members with specific background information regarding the district, including but not limited to the district's vision and goals, statements, local control and accountability plan, and other comprehensive plans, student demographic data, student achievement data, district policy manual, district budget, and minutes of the recent open board meetings. A lot of that she is doing in this orientation, but I don't think she's allowed enough time. This sounds like a pretty long meeting if she does all that.
Just to clarify, Mr. Kaminsky, the meeting that I sent the invite out to is not an orientation, it's just an informational meeting, and the orientation would be provided once board members are seated.
But my point was that she's going above what's required in board policy. And then finally, incoming members are encouraged at district expense and with approval of the board to attend the California School Boards Association's orientation for new trustees, institute for new and first-term board members, and workshops and conferences relevant to the needs of the individual member, the board as a whole, or the district. So I'm encouraging you to put this on the November 8th agenda. There's a California School Board Association orientation on December 1st in San Diego. You can't register yet. Obviously, no one knows who's going to be able to go. But I would encourage the candidates that are here tonight to block off December 1st on your calendar. If you win, you really should go. There's, I think, 7 items covered. It's a full-day conference. But again, it needs approval of the board. So.
Thank you. A couple of things for 9220, Superintendent, will you take a note that we look into the wording for that? And for the 9230, you'll be happy to know, everyone, that the superintendent and the board will be involved as well as working on an orientation program for new board members. And as far as the dates for the CBA, having done it myself, I can tell you there'll be alternative dates that will occur in January.
There's one for the 8th.
Yeah.
But
So there'll be time
that's
to-
via Zoom, that's virtual.
Yeah.
But I would encourage whoever goes to go in person. I went to the CSBA conference when I was interim superintendent, and it was extremely valuable in person. But
Okay.
that's the board's decision.
Good comments, and thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other public comments? Go ahead, come on up. If you couldn't grab a yellow form, come up anyways.
Good evening. My name's Taylor Rethwish. I'm a parent of a little one at Golden Hills Elementary. I wasn't planning on speaking, so that's why I didn't turn in a form, but the comment that the first gentleman made was very startling to me. So for what it's worth, I don't know what it means or the process that's taken to agendize a topic, but I would also second that. I would appreciate a little more information, a policy, clarity on what's acceptable and what's not, et cetera, for what it's worth. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, at this time, 5:58 PM, we will take a short 5-minute break. Okay, if everyone could make their way back to their seats, please. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, reconvening at 6:10 PM. We are on consent agenda. All consent agenda items are considered to be routine by the Board of Trustees and will be taken together as one action item. There will be no separate discussion of items unless a board member so requests. If it is determined that an item needs to be pulled for a separate motion, the board president will call for a separate vote. Are there any questions or comments from the board, or do we need to pull any items from the consent agenda? Any public comments concerning consent agenda items? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6 is starting out with an informational item. Superintendent?
Thank you, President Weinstein. As you've seen over the last couple of meetings, we've had a pattern of trying to work on revising some board policies based on recommendations from CSBA. So want to thank Mr. Kaminsky for pointing out 9220 to be in compliance with the California Voting Rights Act. And we're just continuing our march through to work on revising and updating policies in alignment with guidance. I do want to mention that always remember that federal and state law supersede board policy. So it's like the layers of an onion, peeling them through, that the law of the land still rules over board policy, but nonetheless, our board policies and administrative regulations are very important, guiding our work forward. So this evening, based on the written recommendations from the California School Boards Association, the district is proposing revisions to a few board policies. Briefly, here's a summary of the items that are before you this evening, again, just as a first read. Policy 3110, which is being updated to delete an authorization for temporary transfer of funds, which only pertained to the 2021 and 21-22 fiscal school years. So you'll see that document. Also, Policy 3550, which has been updated to reflect new laws, including AB 130 and AB 486. Also, a revision for Policy 3551, also being updated to reflect new law, AB 130. And finally, we have Policy 3553, again being updated to reflect new law. And all of these are really targeted around fiscal services and our meal programs that we offer for students. So that's what I have for you this evening. And again, this is first read with the intention of bringing these back at our November reading for your consideration for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Go ahead, Trustee Kelly.
Thank you. Superintendent, I do have maybe it's just an opinion, because I've read conflicting data. For the last law, and I forget which one it is, but it's the one, domestic food is our primary choice. Do we anticipate, or have you heard anything of our food costs will increase? And if so, if they do, if the state is still going to be covering that increase?
Pardon, I'm not sure on that. I'm not sure if Mr. Antisari, if you have a comment that you want to contribute, or it's definitely something that we could look into on our food costs, but I'm not sure what the current offset is. for the reimbursement program if the COLA was transitioned over to our meal reimbursement as well.
Okay, so in relation to this policy, or are you just saying because they're talking about domestic? Because they do prioritize domestic, but if that would impact our ability to offer or have to increase how much we receive from the state?
Yeah, if it, for us here, if we anticipate our food costs going up, and if the state is going to reimburse that increased expense if there is one.
That is difficult to answer just because of the way that we order food. We don't only go through large commercial vendors. We also participate in what's called a joint powers agreement, very common. You see it a lot in insurance for school districts. Basically, we all know we're purchasing chicken nuggets, so there's just a lot of districts get together. People can piggyback on their contracts, and we get some pretty low rates for food, what we call commodities. So there isn't really any price concern with the domestic. It's been for quite a while now that they've wanted us to consider not going international first, and now it's just more of a formality. But I don't think there are any real price implications, but if there were, the state would certainly hear about it based on the volumes of meals we serve.
Perfect, thank you.
Any comments from the public? Okay, moving on. Adoption of District Resolution Number 01, October 22, acknowledging Red Ribbon Week, which is October 23rd through the 31st.
Thank you, President Weinstein. Of course, you heard a little bit from PTO earlier about Red Ribbon Week and how they're going to be celebrating at CV. And Red Ribbon is a campaign that's really celebrated nationwide, recognizing and encouraging our students to be drug-free, develop awareness, and promote healthy lifestyles. So on behalf of the district, I'm requesting that the board adopt Resolution 01, October 22, acknowledging Red Ribbon Week.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Do I have a motion approving the resolution for Red Ribbon Week?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, sir. Second?
Kelly, a second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, excuse me, this is a roll call vote, of course, a resolution. Ms. Amaker?
President Weinstein?
Aye.
Vice President Wallach?
Aye.
Clerk Wood?
Aye.
Trustee Kelly?
Aye.
Trustee Kermode?
Aye.
Trustee Napier?
Aye.
Trustee Scott?
Aye.
Thank you. Resolution passes. Next item, discussion and potential board action to approve the formation of a TUSD Facilities Advisory Committee, including bylaws and committee member application. Superintendent Larson Everson.
Thank you, President Weinstein. I know Mr. McKay is bringing up a PowerPoint here. If we could go to the first slide, that would be great. I know that the facilities was kind of a hot topic at the last meeting, but facilities matters have consistently been a central issue, particularly for Trustee Napier, who at the last meeting requested a facilities committee item be agendized for this month. So based on that input and the consensus from the board at the last meeting, I put together a draft as a place to start with the board's discussion. So the development of a TUSD Facilities Advisory Committee, I think it definitely is responsive to current needs. I did a lot of research myself of looking at what some other districts do. There are facilities-related committees, one that's called, I know Jackie's familiar with, a 7-Eleven committee that has, for specific purposes, when you're looking at facilities that you're going to sell or are vacant and changing the use. In our instance, I think based on at least what I'm gathering to this point, this would be a great way to involve community representatives and parents in having a voice about how we use our facilities and what what projects are the most important for us going forward. Our board policy 1220 provides for the establishment of citizens advisory committees. And again, I think by establishing a TUSD Facilities Advisory Committee, it would provide an opportunity for a variety of participation with parents, community members, teachers, support staff, and students so that they could offer recommendations to the board regarding improvements for our different facilities. Because depending on where your children attend, you might have a different perspective on where you would like to see those improvements prioritized or how you'd like to see them prioritized. If we could go to the next slide, please. So how could a facilities advisory committee be formed? Of course, with the board's approval. The facilities advisory can be formed, and the advisory can work together to set forth a meeting schedule, elect officers, and begin their collective work alongside the district. The facilities advisory committee meetings would be conducted in compliance with the Brown Act, with all the posting requirements, et cetera, and it would be guided and supported by our Chief Administrator of Business Services. Next slide, please. So in doing the research that I did and looking at the types of advisories or facilities advisories specifically that many districts have, there's generally representation of parents from each of the schools that are in the districts. So that's what I have started out as a proposal, is to have one parent representative from each school, which would give 6 parent representatives on the advisory, 3 community members, 1 representative from CSEA, our Tehachapi Association of Teachers and Confidential Management, and then 3 secondary level students that are in grades 6 through 12, and that would be a total of 15 members. And all of these members on the advisory would be approved, and you'll see I have a slash there because it's an application process, but they would ultimately be appointed by the board to serve their term, which the most common term that I saw was 2 years for them participating on this type of an advisory committee. Go to the next slide, please. So, of course, advisories are guided by bylaws. So some of the most important initial tasks that the advisory would be doing would be reviewing the bylaws, because the bylaws would be approved by the board. And that's, again, bylaws are what would guide the membership, how people are seated on that advisory, what the process is. Like if someone doesn't come to meetings, how would they be unseated and be replaced? All those kinds of things. And attached to this evening's agenda is a copy of an initial stab on my part at creating bylaws, again, using lots and lots of samples from other districts. So they would go over those bylaws and get to know each other, as well as establish a meeting schedule and select advisory officers. And those would include a chairperson, a vice chair, and then a secretary. But really, the key role that they would be performing would be to act as an advisory to the governing board, with the intention of that group working closely, doing a deeper dive into facilities issues and matters, and weighing in with Mr. Antazari and staff, and then being able to come to the board and make recommendations. Kind of the same structure as the Citizens Task Force. And one way I would look at it is like that group as an example. If they're looking at, if the district is looking at doing a curriculum adoption, that information about the proposed adoption would not just be presented to the board, but would be shared with the Citizens Advisory or the Citizens Task Force, so that they could, if they choose, make a recommendation either in support of or against a particular curriculum to the board. So the Facilities Advisory would do much of the same, is that they could make recommendations to the board, but ultimately the board are the deciders, right, of how the funds are spent, projects that are approved, et cetera. They're just an advisory, and I think through the advisory committee, sometimes there's an opportunity for them to dig deeper. When we're in a board meeting environment, we're moving through things very quickly. It's difficult and challenging to take an hour, hour and a half to dive into a particular issue, to dig down to lots of detail. So advisory teams can really come in handy, because they're people who want to be there. They represent our community, our schools, our students, and our staff, and they're able to weigh in and make recommendations which again are not necessarily in favor, but either for or against something that can bring additional input and information to the board. So proposed timeline, if the board wants to consider this, of course, this is a discussion item this evening, but also listed if the board did wish to take action. If you could go to the next slide, Mr. McKay. If we were looking at the materials that we have this evening we are looking at the proposal to form the advisory, and if the board elects to approve the formation of the advisory, then applications would become available for potential advisory members. I would foresee that in December, the board could approve those proposed facility advisory members, and then in January, they would start up their monthly meetings. And then beginning in February, the board would start receiving the minutes from those monthly meetings. And in April, that would be the first opportunity that the facility advisory would present a brief update to the board as part of a biannual schedule of updates to be conducted in April and September of each school year. And of course, this is just a place to start, open for your discussion and input. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to the board, just so we have all the information, I'd like to start with the public comment. And the first one I have here is Mr. Corey Costello.
Thank you, President Weinstein and board, and I want to first of all take this opportunity to thank you all for putting this on the agenda and for Superintendent Larson Everson for her time on this. We had the opportunity to get some first steps going between herself and Mr. Intezari and another consultant that came in to take a look at some of our facilities on the athletic side, just to look at what we can sort of do and as far as ADA to make sure we're safe, and also what a long-term plan that this facilities committee will kind of help tackle. Just a couple comments. I think I appreciate that comment that this is sort of a place to start. Just a few concerns on the composition of the committee. As I brought up in my comments last month, a lot of this gets held up in bureaucracy, and I'm afraid that 15 is just too large of a committee to really get anything done. And I appreciate the need to represent as many folks as possible. So maybe looking at some of that number, just so there's more efficiencies built in. And then also, I would like to see, maybe it's part of the community members, but I'd really like to see since the Warrior Booster Club, in which I'm the president of, we're an incorporated entity. We do have an agreement with the Tehachapi Unified School District to actually make one of these seats a Warrior Boosters officer. I feel like the athletic facilities have been neglected for so long that if we aren't codified here as having a seat, who knows how in a couple years there could be no athletics representative on this committee, and it would get neglected. So that's my hope, is to get a Warrior Booster officer, either the president, vice president, treasurer, or our secretary on that board as part of the formation of this committee. But that is about it. Just my biggest concerns are just the size, and then making sure that there is actually a boosters representative in the formation of this committee. So that'll do it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Other comments from the public concerning this item? Okay, questions, comments, discussion from the board?
Would you like Mr. McKay to bring up the bylaws or the application? And if that's the board would like to see that, we can bring that up as well and walk on through.
Does anyone want to refresh? I know we've all read it ahead of time, but no? Any questions or comments from the board about formation?
I have a few comments. I'll
ahead.
echo Corey's comments. I'm excited that we're here today to begin this process. Like Superintendent said, the first steps, and I think it's nice to see that framework there. I do have some concerns on the framework and the committee kind of construction of it. As I mentioned a little bit ago with Mr. Schlosser's comments with the movies being shown in class, when I was bringing up the clarification on agendizing things, as you guys may recall, I was the one that echoed Corey's comments last month and requested this to be on the agenda. However, I think I made a misstep in my request. I was not clear. The superintendent took I think, in my opinion, a lot of time and effort and energy into putting this framework together based upon other districts and how they did theirs. But again, I think I made a mistake and did not clarify my request to be clear enough. I made a request. Board was basically silent, which we look at that as a vote of consensus. So the superintendent ran with it. I met with the superintendent this week just to kind of understand, where her framework came from, understand, her ideas and her intent, and all that intent I think was very, very positive. It was very good intent. I just think that I wish I would have been clearer on my intent when agendizing this item. And by no means is this the reflection of this framework an issue. I just wish I would have been a little clearer. So give me a moment here to clarify what I was thinking. The superintendent actually gave me an idea. I don't think it was an idea. It was options that are available to these types of things. She mentioned a subcommittee, and a subcommittee would be constructed of the board, a couple members of the board, and others, and I'll get there in a moment, but to create that framework. I'll be honest with you, I have been the only person on this board that has been over and over and over, pounding the pavement in my campaign, in addition to that, in goals and things we're doing around here as far as facilities, not just athletics, but the pride and the look and the feel of our facilities. And I think the board, as a committee, myself, should have involvement in this framework. I honestly think this should be almost like a workshop, not just, this could take hours to really digest the framework of a committee that's going to stand for years, which I love that, the superintendent already put that in there, that there's a 3-year deal here. This is not we'll just figure it out for the next 6 months and kind of move on. This is a long-term commitment to our community, and I think that the first run at that should show the community that, starting from the superintendent's office to the board, that we're committed to changing this. But I would like to suggest that we take a pause here. I would like to make a request for a subcommittee, myself and someone else of the board that would be interested, and the superintendent, for us to meet between now and the November meeting to really digest this framework of this committee to ensure that all things are met. Like she said, she took her first stab at it. A lot of time was spent on looking at the history, and she showed me her homework, and it was a lot, looking at the other districts and what they do. But I would like to have some involvement in that, and I think a lot of that framework will stand. But this subcommittee would only last literally for a month. The superintendent, myself, and one other board member would be on this committee for 1 month, create that framework, and then bring that back to the board for the formation of the long kind of standing committee. That subcommittee would then cease to exist. The new committee would take over from there. So just wanted to throw that out there. Based on some clarification the superintendent provided to me, some education that she gave to me, that kind of helped me kind of frame it into what I would like to see from here. So I'd like to open that up to discussion.
One comment I'd like to make a clarification. Sure. A subcommittee of the board has a limited time frame. You do something, you solve it, it ends. So an advisory committee goes on, as you said, it was outlined. But what you're saying is to create a subcommittee solely to decide how to set up the advisory committee?
Correct. And we would only last for 1 month. It's a very, very finite window. It basically puts the pressure on us to say, get to work, get it done. A lot of the framework is there, so I don't think this is going to be, 4 months worth of work. I think this could be a couple meetings between now and November to clarify that. And you're right, that committee would have a deadline and an end date. We're done. The advisory committee would kind of follow along the framework that the superintendent has put together. It has long-term planning here.
Okay, so a couple things there. Does anyone have any comments on the agenda item as it's written, the advisory committee that they want to talk about?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Trustee Wallach.
From a practical standpoint, after seeing how the committee is being comprised, it's my understanding that the person most eminently qualified with facilities, Tyler Napier, because he's a trustee, will not be included in the advisory committee. Is that correct?
I apologize, trustee Wallach, but I was having a side conversation with council.
I can say it again.
Yeah, if you don't mind, but just
No,
give me
no,
1
no.
minute, because I need to get out what council was saying, that because we don't have on the agenda tonight an item to form a subcommittee.
Right.
So that would have to be placed on the November agenda before we could have discussion and take action to form a subcommittee, because that's a separate item. So no, I
Right,
just wanted to
that's
say
why
that.
first I asked, do we want to talk about the agenda item as written? Is there comment on that?
And then trustee Wallach, that's,
Thank you
I'm
for that
sorry to interrupt you.
clarification.
Yeah, and you are correct in what you said.
Oh, I am.
Trustee Wallach, you are correct.
So.
It would be, as it's written, it would be what, the membership as it's shown.
So is that advisory committee open to have the most qualified individual to be part of that committee, a part of it, the trustee?
So are you asking if a trustee could apply as a citizen to be on the committee?
I don't think that's possible.
That,
I actually believe that Mr. Herndon, is that possible, that a board member can fill a community member spot on an advisory?
Question is, can a board member serve on an advisory committee?
I think the question is that based on how, if you could bring up the bylaws, Mr. McKay, the actual bylaw document, it's an attachment. The way that the bylaws are currently listed, it shows that the membership would include one parent representative from each school. Some of our board members are parents. It also lists 3 community members, and I believe that the question that's on the floor is if a serving current board member could fill in one of those seats as a parent from a school or as a community member on the Facilities Advisory Committee.
So I don't know of any reason that a board member could not serve on that committee. No, obviously, no more than a quorum of you could serve, right? It could impact whether the committee is subject to the Brown Act, but that doesn't seem to be a concern because you've already laid that out.
Yes, we've already laid out that the committee would be compliant with the Brown Act. So the bottom line is, on the membership, that it's noted within the bylaws, and I think I noted it in my presentation, that any member who is selected to serve on the Facilities Advisory would actually be appointed by the board. So there's another attachment that was included with the agenda this evening that's the actual application. So what the intention would be is that we would post the information, make the applications available, provide an extended period of time for people to apply. All the applications that would be received would be presented to the board, and in open session, the board would make their selection and have their discussion of who the appointees to the advisory committee would be. So that would be strictly a board decision.
So again, before we move on to trustee Napier's request, is there any more discussion on this advisory
I didn't
committee?
get a chance to finish.
Thank you, Mr. Herndon.
Oh, I didn't know you had a second item.
No,
Go-
the superintendent.
But your
said
comments
The
were on-
superintendent didn't hear my comments, and she asked me to repeat them, and I didn't, but she answered a lot of questions. So I was just going to make a comment about the advisory board, okay?
This one, okay,
Yeah,
go
this one,
ahead.
yes. If the sitting board member that has the most experience in this area can be part of the advisory committee, I would certainly support that, okay?
Thank you, trustee Wallach, and I think we just answered that, so.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Okay, so any other comments about the agenda item as is written as an advisory item?
Yeah.
Just comments on it to understand it for now.
Yeah, Kelly does.
Okay, go ahead, trustee
I actually
Kelly.
would take Mr. Wallach's suggestion, go one step further and ask that we actually have a slot for a volunteer board member, if a board member so volunteered to be part of the committee. Going out to be a citizen to have to apply, I think it would have more bite and be taken a little bit more seriously if we did have a volunteer board member on that committee, on this one we're speaking about right now.
Any other comments about the advisory?
Yeah, I'd like to qualify my remark. When I said a board member, I meant Tyler Napier, okay?
Okay, understood that.
So I just want to clarify from Trustee Kelly's comment that you're saying, because the way that I brought it forward this evening, the proposed size is those 15, with you're suggesting that there would be an additional, a 16th person who would be a volunteer board member.
Correct.
But they would still fall into the same thing, appointed by the rest of the board.
Correct, and they would
along-
not serve as an officer.
Okay,
In my
go ahead.
opinion, I think that they should fill out an application. I think it's more just along with everybody else. Let's, if he's going to be a parent or she's going to be a parent, have them be that. And then their expertise comes out of that. But I don't think it should be a board member, personally. I think
And
they should fill
I
out.
feel similar that if we go with it as an advisory committee, then we will be hearing about it and making decisions about it. So I don't know that we would want to be, one of us be on that committee.
No, I'm
'cause I don't
okay.
roll.
I'm okay with a board member, but I think they should fill out an application along with everybody else.
So the only thing that I would comment is, when you have a committee and they have to vote, having an even number is not so good. That it's really better to have 15 or 13 or 11 than it is to have 16, which is a nice round number and can result in a tied vote. And so anytime that there is something that comes before that advisory and they're voting to make a recommendation, you would want to be able to identify clearly a majority vote. So that would be, we could adjust the membership as is. We can start all over again. It's at your direction.
But that's what we would be doing after we bring it back in November and vote for this subcommittee. We could talk about the numbers and things like that at that time, correct?
Well, it couldn't be brought back in, this could not be brought back in November.
No, I get that.
But if there's a
The committee that
subco-
Tyler was talking about, to fine tune what we're talking about, right, if I'm getting it straight, then we could talk about numbers and things like that of the amount of people on the committee. Maybe we think, maybe that's why a 7-Eleven works good, because you don't have as many people on it. But
I believe a 7-Eleven has to have at least 7 and not more than 11.
So anyways, that would be discussed in the committee, not the advisory committee.
In the potential committee, if that item came forward and there was
That's
board
fine.
vote in favor of developing the subcommittee and then they did the work, yes. Agreed.
Moving back to the advisory committee, I think, Jeff, did you have a comment, trustee Commode?
Yes, I had a couple of comments. First, I really appreciate the quick turnaround to be able to present a complete proposal tonight. Second, I like the overall structure that I see. I agree with Mr. Costello on 2 points. One, since our athletic facilities are such a major part of what we're looking at, I would support one of the community member positions going to the Warriors Booster Club to represent that interest. The other thing I agree with Mr. Costello on, as having been on lots of committees over lots of years, I would like to see a way to reduce the number of people on the committee. I'm not sure where to reduce them. I really like the idea of one parent from each of the schools. Maybe reducing the number of secondary level students, certainly including at least one representative student from the secondary school. So I'm not sure how we reduce the overall numbers. And then I guess my final comment, well, they're sort of tied together. I don't necessarily understand what Trustee Napier's concerns are with this structure unless they're along the lines of what I've just been talking about. So I'm not sure what else, if the interest is to get started and we can make some adjustments to the structure tonight, then you all could be up and running come January. But if there are some significant things that you're thinking about, I respect that. I just don't necessarily understand what they are. And my final comment would be, I'm conflicted. I certainly don't have any objection to a board member serving on the advisory committee, but I don't know that they should be there as a board member on the advisory committee. I think I'm more comfortable with them being one of the parents representing one of the schools, because I think it gets messier if they're there as the board's representative to this advisory committee to the board. So I think that's where I fall on that part. Is no objection to Trustee Napier or Trustee Kelly or anybody else serving on the advisory committee. I just don't think they should be an official representative of the board to that committee.
And just to clarify, my understanding of what Mr. Herndon was clarifying for us was that just because a parent is a board member, it doesn't disqualify that person from being a part of the membership. So they wouldn't be a board representative or a board, they would be a facilities advisory representative who happens to be a parent and a board member, if that makes sense.
It does, and I certainly would have no trouble supporting Trustee Kelly as a parent appointee to the board, because obviously I'm very familiar with his qualifications. I just think needs to be a separation between an advisory committee and the board.
And
So,
that's what I was trying to say by having them fill out an application.
Those are my comments. I'm done.
So a couple of things we could do if, as Trustee Commode said, if we could make.
Can I respond to his comments and questions that were directed at me?
Well, I was going to make a suggestion, because we might have to table this. If there's a couple things we could do, we could make changes to the advisory committee to address the concerns brought up and stay with that route, or we could table this and then Trustee Napier, you would write a written request that we actually make an agenda item for November to look at a subcommittee that would be short-lived, like you said, 30 days, possibly 3 members, then to decide the best way to move on the advisory. So we could kind of solve it tonight and get it voted on, or we could do the other route. So, but then you can go ahead. I just wanted to give us a couple options.
Okay. A couple of your questions, Jeff, I'll start with the one that is popping in my head right now, is the assumption that if someone was on that committee as a board member, they would be representing the board. And we know that's not the case. So it's not inappropriate or unethical or illegal for a board member to serve on a committee, correct?
Agreed.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're clear, because I don't want the assertion to be that, it's inappropriate for a board member to be on a committee. It's not. It happens up and down local government, up and down in the country, and you've been on them with board members. I've been on them with city council board members. It happens all the time. So it's not inappropriate or unethical. It's just something you don't personally like.
Agreed.
Okay, perfect. Second item there is, I think it was your first question, was you just kind of don't understand where I'm going from is, where I'm coming from is, I made a vague request for a board discussion. Superintendent Larson Everson ran with it, with kind of how she viewed my request, right? And again, that's not malintent, that's not, I'm gonna get, no, it was just, I wasn't clear enough. Again, there was zero discussion from the board when I brought it up, so all I'm asking is for the respect of the board to say, okay, Trustee Napier, you were the one that made the request. Now we're here. Unfortunately, there was work and effort and energy put into it by her. I'm asking for the respect of, let me clarify. I would ask to table it. Let me clarify, bring it back to the board with a true clarification of what my request was. That's it.
Okay, so.
And part of that would include the subcommittee and the reframing of it and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then I'd like to get public comments so we can hear all that and think about that while we're, can I get some public comments so we can think
I was
about
just going to
that?
follow up on your comment.
Go ahead.
I think the subcommittee would be most logical way to move forward, establishing a framework for the advisory committee. So I would go along with you and reschedule the advisory committee vote until that report came in.
Okay, thank you. Now, public comment related to this item. Claudia.
Thank you, Claudia Elliott. I'm speaking just for myself. And I happened to go to a meeting yesterday at Parks and Rec. And they have a problem with the pool. It's continuing. But somebody said, well, they thought it was built in 1959. I said, no, it was not 1959. It was 1967. But the pool has 4 to 5 years left, and that's if we're lucky. So I just wanted to suggest that perhaps one of your public positions on this advisory might be someone from Parks and Rec who could help, because there are lots of sharing and things of facilities, and I know the pool has been a part of Tehachapi Unified for a long time also. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, that as you think about it, it could be anyone in town, or in the larger area, but maybe if it's somebody who has an understanding of facilities and understanding of community needs, that might be a good input for your committee, as well as perhaps a segue for whatever shared interest there might be in solving the pool problem. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there other public comment to consider for this? Yes, Mr. Kaminsky, come on up.
Thank you, President Weinstein. We've heard about Parks and Rec and Warrior Boosters, and a group that I doubt anybody's here that needs to be part of this discussion is fine arts. Fine arts. There's no, auditorium and performing arts center was promised in the bond that was back in 20 years ago or more. Didn't come through. Their band rooms are portable at the high school. The middle school's luckier. They have the old Tehachapi High band room, which is sufficient for their needs. But, and how you balance all that, there's going to be a lot of different viewpoints on this committee, no matter how big it is. But I just wanted to put a reminder there, don't forget about the fine arts.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
So I'm the athletic director at JMS, and I missed the last meeting because I had COVID. So I have a question, and maybe it's geared more for you, but is this all for THS? Or does this include JMS? Because we have
I will
athletic-
clarify that for you. For my intent,
Yeah.
If you listen to the meeting from last month, I did speak about performing arts. I spoke about all facilities. I spoke about teachers having to buy portable air conditionings during the heat wave, all those things. And I made it very clear that our teachers shouldn't have to have portable air conditioners. They should have air conditioning units, all those types of things.
That's
So-
a part of our contract. That's
Right, yeah, absolutely. In addition to a contract, it's just the right thing to do. So part of my intent is a global picture of facilities. It's anything from sidewalks to bathrooms to libraries to everything. This is not just that, but boosters would represent the athletics piece, so on and so forth. But absolutely, it is a global conversation, not just athletics.
So we don't have boosters. So when you're talking athletics, do you just mean THS? Because we're just too small to have boosters. We just are too small for it. We have side issues for athletics as well.
Absolutely.
So-
that's part of superintendent's framework as well, is representation from those schools as well. So this is not. And I joke with Corey, I'm like, it's not just about sports. It's big picture, right? This is a big picture because it comes down to a teacher walking into their classroom having a sense of pride that they have nice facilities and the lighting works and the air conditioning works and the hallways are clean for the kids and they have a sense of pride. So all those types of things are a big part of it. Absolutely.
So it's not just athletics.
No,
it's big
and it's not
picture.
just one school. It's here. It's everywhere. It's all of our school facilities. Absolutely.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so getting us back to this, I'm sorry, Corey, I saw your hand and then I didn't see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up to the suggestion about the subcommittee to discuss this from the booster standpoint. We certainly would be supportive of that, just so we can get it right. I hear a lot of other folks coming in on this conversation, and I think what Trustee Napier was pointing out is important to take. A lot of this stuff feeds, and I think hopefully there wasn't any disdain in the fact that the Warrior Boosters only supports the high school, because that's just how we're incorporated and how it works. And there's a lot more people showing up to the high school football game than the middle school, but it's just there wasn't a middle school athletics in the 80s when the booster club was formed for high school athletics. So a lot of our facilities on not only athletics but even the fine arts, they all speak to each other. I mean, technically, Coy Burnett Stadium sits on the JMS campus. I had a JMS teacher mad at me because now they don't get to run the stadiums anymore because I pointed out that the stairs were failing. So she's a friend of mine. She gave me a hard time about it. But that sort of thing. So the facilities complement each other. The band and the performing arts. The band, I don't know if you've not been to a game this year, our pet band under Cayman Surratt is unbelievable this year, what he has done with that program. And it's very important to have the band involved in the athletics piece as well. So the performing arts is certainly important. I think when you get into the pool conversation, we all might as well just empty every penny we have into that, because that's a big lift. And it's technically not even the school's facility, it's TVRPD's and all that. But I think it'd be good to get it right. And I think it's important to point out, we're not going to be able to get everybody's special interests maybe represented this time around. But the point of the committee, when we get through certain things and some of the really important facilities that are low-hanging fruit are handled and replaced, then we go to the next one. So this facility, whatever it looks like, through the subcommittees, hopefully figuring out, will not solve everything in the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But I think now that there'll be a plan moving forward, we'll be able to solve many more interests in the future. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any additional public comment? Okay, so getting back to our agenda now, the agenda.
I had one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just had one more, these committees and everything, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 6 years, we talked about passing a bond, and we had a bond person came, and, we did some surveys and things like that. And so I think that's a very important part of it. We asked the community what they were interested in, and they prioritize things. And I think when we get some feedback from the community, that's going to be our pulse of which way to go. We can't just, we're like, well, this is important. We have a large community and we have to involve them in it. And the surveys were eye-opening to me. So I think if we approach that again within our committee, this committee that we're talking about, I think we'll get clarification on what our community is about and what they're looking for.
Okay, thank you. So to keep us focused back on our agenda item, the agenda item is to form an advisory committee, which would include bylaws and application, all of those pieces not 100% decided. So we can go ahead and take a vote on whether we want to form an advisory committee tonight and get that going. That's one thing, and that is what's on the agenda. So I'm going to ask if I have a motion to form an advisory committee as stated on the agenda. Do I have a motion from the board to form an advisory committee as stated on the agenda? Okay, I'm going to make the motion that we form an advisory committee as stated on the agenda with all of the pieces to be put together yet. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so then we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, so motion does not pass. And then trustee Napier, you're going to submit a written request for an agenda item for a subcommittee that you're going to detail the nature of what that subcommittee is going to do for a future agenda for next month.
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next item. This is a request for action to place the TUSD SPED action plan finalized by the superintendent in January 2022 from the superintendent's evaluation onto the agenda as per board bylaw 9322. To start out with, our legal counsel, Mr. Herndon, has some words to say to us.
Evening, President Weinstein, board members, and superintendent. The concern that I wanted to raise in looking at the agenda item is that it calls for public discussion or review of a document that comes from an employee evaluation. So I would caution against doing that in that we're talking about a confidential personnel record. So that's my concern, that's not something that a board would typically make public when it concerns employee personnel records.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So this document that's being spoken of was presented to the board in open session years ago.
That's incorrect, trustee Napier. The document that was requested is not that document. It's not the original school services report. And the document itself was not presented to the board in open session. What was presented to the board was a presentation from the school services team. So just to be clear, the school services team, I came to the board way back when in 2020 and requested that the board contract with School Services of California specifically for the purpose of coming alongside, working with the district to help us evaluate our programs and services and find out, what are our areas of strength and help us create a roadmap for increasing, strengthening, and improving those services. As a result of them doing that ultimately that request for that contract was approved by the board. After they did the work, they came back and presented a PowerPoint presentation to the board on March 23rd of 2021. And the item that was requested to be placed on the agenda is not that specific item, is not that report, and is not that PowerPoint.
Can I make a few comments? Let me tell you my initial proposal, and you tell me whether I can go forward or not on it, okay? I'm going to read some remarks about my initial proposal to see whether I fall with or without the parameters of your comments.
Oh, and Trustee Wellick, I just want you to know my comments just reflect looking at the actual agenda item and what's proposed.
I want to
there.
clarify that, if I might.
Board President's pleasure.
I want to clarify that, if I might.
Go ahead.
Okay. In the best interest of the district and SPED department, a proposal was made to the board a few months ago for a board SPED committee to augment the SPED action plan. The board did not approve the committee. The major shortcomings in that presentation was a failure to include specific SSC citations. The inclusion of those critical SSC findings may have changed some minds. The agenda tonight connects the superintendent's evaluation. All of the critical SSC findings offered to the board tonight for consideration will be the bulk of my comments. The agenda tonight connects the superintendent's evaluation with the SPED action plan finalized January 26, 2022. There's absolutely no connection between the confidential superintendent's evaluation and the public SPED action plan.
Excuse me, Trustee Wallach.
Let me finish, please. Let me finish.
But excuse me, what you emailed me to place on the agenda was very specific to that document.
Okay, can I continue?
Well, I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm trying to, can we let Mr. Herndon elaborate a little bit more on
I
how?
didn't get a chance to finish my comments, so you could elaborate.
So, Mr. Wallach, in terms of intent, I'm just focusing on what's on the agenda, and it appears to be tied to a document that's specifically part of a employee evaluation. So that's my concern.
Okay, it's not. It is and it isn't. The SPED action plan was sent to the board by President Weinstein on February 6, 2022. Both President Weinstein and the superintendent stated it would be placed on the February 22nd, 2022 agenda for discussion. It wasn't. This has always been a public document. My proposal tonight is simply a comparison of two standalone public documents. It has nothing to do with the superintendent's evaluation.
I would disagree with that because that document is, the email that you sent to me requesting the agenda item was specific to that document, and that document is specifically named within the evaluation and was provided to the board in that context. And I want to let you know that district practices are compliant with the Brown Act, and in particular related to personnel records and privacy. And the district does not have a practice for any employee of making evaluation documents public. In fact, the documents are held in confidence, and accordingly, all employees have the right to privacy of their personnel records and evaluation. Having said that, Trustee Wallach, I would be glad to provide the board at a future meeting and with the board's direction, updates related to TUSD's special education programs and services. Again, as a reminder, I explicitly brought the request forward to the board seeking the contract with the SSC for the purpose of reviewing our programs and services to offer assessment and recommendations. You refer to them as citations. We were not cited by SSC. They made recommendations to us, so how we could strengthen and improve our programs. And again, I think that you would find, the board would find, that a lot has been done since the original SSC report to address shortcomings such as staffing changes, staff training, the creation and implementation of new staff positions, revisions to policies and practices, etc. So again, I stand ready, willing, open, and able to provide the board, at the board's direction, with an update on SPED programs and services. However, the specific document that you are specified to me in email was named clearly as an evaluation item.
First of all, my reference to citations had nothing to do like a police officer is giving you a citation. It was synonymous with the quotations. I'll ask you one question. The SPED action plan was comprised by a number of staff to come up with this plan. It was sent to us on February 22nd without any caveat that it was to be a state secret or preempted in any way. My question to you, is this a public document or not?
I would say that specifically, employee evaluations, personnel records of that type are expressly exempt from the California Public Records Act, so that's one layer. So in other words, you would not have a duty to produce it, but beyond that, you have a reason not to produce it because your employee has a privacy interest, employees generally, in evaluation documents.
Okay, let me ask you one more question. This should do it. It was my intention tonight to absolutely not discuss anything specifically included in the SPED plan. I was totally intended on discussing what wasn't included in the SPED plan. Not anything to do with her evaluation or the SPED plan. It's what wasn't included. It was my total focus of tonight.
So are you, asking for an opinion on that?
You know, I want to know whether, since she's concerned about talking about the SPED plan, I have no intention of talking about that. My intention is to discuss what is not included, what has not been included from the SSC findings in the SPED plan.
So again, referencing back to that SPED plan, if you're going to speak about your view of what's not in it, then are you not referring to that document and describing it?
It's not my view. These are citations taken directly from the SSC special education study that are not part of the SPED plan. It's not my opinion. These are quotes.
If I may, Mr. Herndon, the email that I received from Trustee Wallach, if I have your permission to read it, have your request for the agenda item itself?
Certainly.
Okay. Superintendent, Board Policy 9322 requires requests for agenda placement to be directed to you. I am formally requesting the SPED report finalized on January 26, 2022, be placed on the October 11th Board 2022 agenda. This request is made 3 weeks in advance of the October 11th, 2022 board meeting. Please confirm placement at your earliest.
That's exactly right. But the other part of my intention wasn't to discuss anything in that plan. It was only to be used as a reference to discuss what wasn't in the plan. I have no intention of discussing anything in that plan. It's what wasn't included, quotations taken directly from the SSC study, which has never been discussed. The SPED plan was originally slated to be placed on the February agenda for discussion. It was not placed, and there's been no follow-up or presentation of that SPED plan from its inception. So again, I don't intend to discuss anything in the SPED plan. It's just used for a reference.
So Trustee Wallach, again, the only document I'm concerned about for you this evening is that evaluation document. So that's the only one I'm referencing, but I'm hearing you say you're not going to address it, you're going to address the things that aren't in it, but using it as a reference. So to me, that's discussing this evaluation document.
But since those things weren't in the original SPED plan, they had nothing to do with their evaluation.
I think superintendent's offering that it's not that this information in general is somehow taboo, it's just this particular personnel.
Okay, one question to you and the superintendent. How can I format my request to provide the information to the board, what it's not included from the SSC plan?
Okay, so point of order.
Turn your microphone.
Sorry, microphones.
Excuse me, point of order, Trustee Wallach. Let's let some other comment to see
Okay,
if the
that's fine
board
with me.
wants to continue this discussion before we go to asking for a motion. So Trustee Kermode, go ahead.
I just had a suggestion on maybe how to reframe the question.
Okay.
I would certainly support a request for a future agenda item that provides us an update of things, because I don't think that's ever been presented publicly, an overall detailed update of the things that have been done in response to the special education study, which can then lead to a conversation during that agenda item about what things remain to be done, other suggested actions, other suggested needs. But I agree with an idea of an open discussion of what's been done with the study, what have we accomplished, what remains to be done. So
Or
I
what
would
hasn't been
support
done.
that, or what hasn't been done.
You know,
But without
Okay, without referencing the SPED plan.
Correct.
Okay. I agree with that. Maybe my intention was not to discuss the SPED plan, but use it as a reference what wasn't included. But since that is obviously not acceptable tonight, yours has a very reasonable suggestion. I have one more month on this board. And so either I get it out in November, or it's going to be DOA. So can we be assured that based upon Trustee Kermode's practical suggestion of how to place it on the agenda, that it'll be done in October? Or do I need to do a formal request?
So you do need to do a formal request. Go ahead.
If I may, I'll volunteer to prepare a draft request, send it to you, Trustee Wallach.
Thank you.
See if it meets your needs, and then I'll turn in that formal request through the president and the superintendent.
I will miss your counsel.
Okay, so getting back to the agenda item we do have before us, it's a request for action to place the TUSD SPED action plan finalized by the superintendent in January 2022 from the superintendent's evaluation on the agenda. That item, is there any public comment on that agenda item that we should consider? Is there any other deliberation from the board?
Yeah, Kelly has some, because I just want to clarify.
Go ahead.
Thank you, that where we're at. So just for me, and we've beat this horse to death more than once. The special education action plan was never made public. Is that correct?
The board made a decision at some point last
It's
year.
just a yes or no, please.
That was provided to me no, it was not.
Thank you. Okay.
Because it was included as listed within an
Thank
evaluation
you.
document.
With that in mind, I am totally on board with Mr. Commode's suggestion, but I'd also, and I need to know if I need to do this formally, ask for a special education advisory committee as well.
Okay, that would be a separate issue. Can we solve this first? Okay.
One more comment.
Last comment,
Yeah,
Mr.
okay.
Wallach.
I disagree with the superintendent. The action plan was sent to the board by President Weinstein on February 6, 2022, long before it was part of her evaluation. Both the superintendent and Ms. Weinstein stated it would be placed on the February 22 agenda for discussion. If it was part of her evaluation, that would never have happened. This has always been a public document, so my question again is the SPED plan submitted to the board prior to the placement on her evaluation a public document or not?
So my understanding that it was part of the evaluation, and on that basis, it would not be a public document.
So retroactively, it's not a public document. Even though it was submitted to the board in February before placement on her evaluation, you're telling me retroactively, it's not a public document?
Well, an evaluation document can be submitted to the board. That's part of that exchange that you have.
But it wasn't part of her evaluation when it was submitted to the board.
Written, pardon me, trustee Wallach, but it is specifically written into the actual evaluation document.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying that was after it was submitted to the board.
Point
There was
of
no
order.
there was no caveat attached to the submission of the board. It was considered a public document because it was planned to be placed on the February agenda for board discussion. How can it be part of her evaluation when the superintendent and Ms. Weinstein said it was going to be part of public discussion? How can that be?
Point of order, please.
Okay, so going back to our agenda item, is there a motion to place the TUSD SPED action plan on an agenda? Okay, there is not a motion.
Hold on. I will make the motion that the special ed action plan not attached to any evaluation is on.
It is attached to an
But
evaluation.
that's not what you asked for.
We have to vote on first what's on our agenda.
I would agree, but that's not what you said because you didn't put the words as part of her evaluation in that.
Okay, so I'm going to read the whole
Okay.
thing, thank you. Is there a motion to place the TUSD SPED action plan finalized by the superintendent in January 22 from the superintendent's evaluation on the agenda, on a future agenda? Is there a motion for that action? Okay, there is not a motion. So motion denied.
One final
Okay,
comment
now-
on that. I will totally agree with trustee Kermode's recommendation that the information is going to be reformatted without the SPED thing, but presented to the board.
Okay, so that's what I was getting to. I was going to say, trustee Wallach, you are going to resubmit as suggested by trustee Kermode for a future agenda item.
November agenda item.
Okay, you'll write that in your request.
How would you like me to format that when I make my request?
Let's let the two of you do what was
Okay.
discussed, okay? Okay, so, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Herndon, I appreciate the patience.
You're welcome. Good night. Yeah. Do you need
Claudia? Yeah, that's what I'm asking. You just want a clarification of what was said, or, because, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a comment.
I understand.
Because you had mentioned that you were going to take public comments, and that didn't happen. So I just, because as Mr. Reel brought to your attention a few meetings ago and was addressed, that concern, at least on some members of the public, that the superintendent's evaluation could end up being something other than that. And from what I can see, this is sort of what happened, that the public presentation of the special report, and then it just sort of segued into evaluation. And so instead of it being discussed publicly, what the concerns were and how they were being addressed, it segued into protected private information that probably shouldn't have been, in my opinion. So I just thought I would mention that, because you can always count on me to be watching out for the Brown Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to business, Mr. Antazari.
Thank you, President Weinstein.
Okay, first is an information item on a solar project update.
Thank you very much, President Weinstein. It's a pleasure to be here and provide an update on the solar project. I know it has been a while, and kind of when I provide the update, you'll see why. Next slide, please. All right, so because it has been a while, we are going to kind of just provide a refresher to everyone as to what the project is and why it's beneficial to the district, provide an update as to where we're at, the current savings projections, and provide what has been submitted to the Division State Architect, DSA, for review. They approve essentially all construction at a school site. And then we are going to be seeking the board's direction because this is a project that is highly technical in nature. And while I'm here to answer any questions necessarily related to the contract or maybe some superficial kind of questions about solar that I've kind of studied up on, hoping to be able to answer your questions. This is an information item. If you do have questions, we would want to cover them. If not at this meeting, at the next meeting, and we can also provide a representative from the agency that is assisting us with this project. But we will be looking for the board's direction because we did, in December 2020, we brought forward an agreement to engage what is a power purchase agreement. And so that has certain elements that timelines and restrictions, it had layouts, but because of certain things outside of our control that we had to kind of shift or change. And then there's, most of them did not have material changes, but we do have something related to Golden Hills Elementary School that we'd like to bring up. Next slide, please. Oh, wait, sorry, go back. Okay, so during the presentation, I'm gonna be talking about a few things. Number one, you'll hear me mention SPURR, S-P-U-R-R. That stands for School Project for Utility Rate Reduction. And so that is the agency that developed this agreement that we're piggybacking on. They all come, the board comes from school districts in California, and this agreement template was designed by professionals in this space. for the purposes of protecting school districts from just kind of having to start one of these agreements from scratch. Forefront Power is essentially the company that will be the capital outlay to get the solar project going, and they're the financiers. So on the right at the top, that I will be referring to as a ground mount panel. It's just mounted to the ground on like a tripod with a solar panel on it. And then the other, which we're used to seeing over parking lots, will be referred to as a canopy panel, just so that we're all on the same page. Any questions so far? No? Okay. All right. So just as a refresher, the reason why we're moving forward with this power purchase agreement, and just to clarify, this was something that was already kind of in process when I got here, but because of the shutdowns, this was kind of slowed down, but we picked it back up, and I'm excited to kind of remind everybody. So currently, we pay our utility bill like most people, but this project, the reason why we would want to move forward with it is because now instead of paying one person for utilities, essentially we would be paying two. We would be, because we would be generating our own power, and that would come at a lesser rate than what we pay SoCal Edison currently. You're not allowed to be entirely independent from the grid, so there would be some use of power, but all of that in combination would still provide the savings for the district. So when we talk about savings, it's not that we're getting money, it's just in the long term. So we'll talk about, so to kind of put it in perspective, we'll be focusing on the amount of savings in the first year and then moving forward. Okay, so the entire point of this is that when you move forward with the lease for the solar, you're essentially hedging or locking in, restricting any changes in the amount that we pay for utilities. As we've all experienced, I think at the last presentation for last year, we said that there was going to be a 9% increase, and we anticipate that increases, that the cost of things will continue to increase, and this is a hedge against that. Because we would be essentially paying for the power that's generated for these items, it creates, we don't own them. So if they break, the company replaces it. If they're not working within certain parameters, like if they're not getting enough power that we need, then they have to fix it. And it's also to their best interest because the more power they generate, the more money they make, the more we pay them, the less we're paying SoCal Edison, and so we're saving money. Any questions on this slide? No? Okay. So here we're going to start going through the initial plans and then what was submitted or approved. Next slide, please. So here we have Tehachapi High School. So the blue represents where the panels will be along the parking lot there right in front of the school. That would be the canopy that was proposed. And then towards the bottom in the field on the south end of the campus would be where we would have an array of ground mounted. They would be fenced off. It's a property that we currently do not use. The feedback from the board was that I received seemed to be an interest in making sure that we did not take up as much space, that we just be conservative about our space and consider expansion in the future, because this is a 20-year agreement. It could be 25, so it's important that we took that into consideration. So because the canopy is more expensive to construct, it does result in less savings, but it does provide a benefit. So this is what was originally proposed. Next slide, please. And so this is what was approved. And as you can see, for the most part, there are no material changes. We did note here that there would require some minor ADA upgrades in the parking lot. When we say minor upgrades, it has to do with whether it's the slope on like the sidewalk, because there's certain restrictions for handicap access, ADA compliance, path of travel. So these things, you can think of them as things that would cost less than $10,000 to do when we talk about minor upgrades in the parking lot. So this is the array that was submitted for and approved, and this is related to the high school. Next slide. Okay, and just as a reminder, so the high school was granted a battery, and what this battery does is just essentially store cheaper power and release it back into the system during peak times, just to increase the efficiency and savings. This came at no cost to the district.
Can I ask a question, quick
Yes, sir.
question? Does that involve storage capacity if the power goes out completely?
No, it does not.
Okay.
It is primarily for storing cheaper power on off-peak times and to release during peak hours. Next, so this plan was approved. Next slide. And so here we have Jacobson Middle School. Due to just the layout of the property, it was difficult to try to implement the canopy system. So this was the original layout because they're spaced out on that east side of the campus because there are power lines that run across there. But this is an unused part of the campus. Next slide, please. And so essentially that, aside from where the interconnection to the grid happened, the plan primarily stays the same. Next slide. So similarly for Cummings Valley, we did look at installing canopy at the parking lot in front of the school on the east side of the campus due to its orientation. So because the solar panels work because if they face the equator, right, and get as much sun. But because the orientation of where the parking lot is, the canopies would be facing east-west. And so to increase the amount that we would have to get enough power for the school, it just doesn't pencil out to being effective, especially a campus like that we have quite a bit of unused space. Next slide, please. So primarily the approval remained the same. The plans remain the same. Next slide, please. So here at Tompkins Elementary, so as part of the feedback, we did change to apply for the canopies. Tompkins is one of our smallest schools, very crowded, and so we initially had plans for the northeast side, that empty baseball field, to put ground mounts out there, but due to consideration that we might need that space in the future, we have gone to the canopy. This isn't going to be over a parking lot, though. It's going to be in the field. Next slide, please. And so that is what was submitted for approval with the DSA. Next slide. So Golden Hills. So Golden Hills is where our team needs a bit of direction because we have a couple of options. They both have their, positives and negatives. So we were looking to install the canopy in the parking lot. It's beneficial because of just how the parking lot is laid out. It kind of, because it's in the middle of a neighborhood, kind of prevents like vandalism because they're up high as opposed to being accessible. They're in the middle of the campus, a little more secure. It was just the original idea that we were looking for. The issue is that because of the age of the school, I think it's coming on close to 40 years, a lot of the compliance requirements for path of travel have kind of been grandfathered in, but because we are doing a material change, we would need to consider updating the path of travel. So I don't know if some of you guys in the public are familiar, but that slope that goes down to the front office at Golden Hills, that is no longer considered a compliant path of travel. So we would have to have I don't recall the name. Let's see. We would call it school entrance. So a ramp to the entrance would have handrails, multiple landing pads, and grades in between. So it would have a switchback. That's what it's called. So to go down so that it's easier for anyone that needs that ADA path of travel. That is not cheap. And so that's why we wanted to bring two of the proposals to your attention for consideration. So next slide, please. So the first proposed would be ground mounts installed on the western side of the campus. The positives is that there is space there. The ground mounts are cheaper and therefore provide greater savings. They're a little more flexible in terms of their orientation. So we can produce pretty efficiently. One of the downsides that we found being new to Tehachapi is that I guess quite a few years ago there were some trees that were planted, and while they're not necessarily thriving, it is an area that we want to be respectful of that. But that is because of its proximity to the interpoint of connection, so that is like 50 feet as opposed to some that have been like 500 feet. And that all of that adds to the cost. So this is a practical approach, but it does have its downsides based on kind of the history of Golden Hills that we want to respect. As well as what I mentioned about it being kind of close to the street and a bit accessible, especially at an elementary school, and it being in the middle of a residential community. The next slide, please. So this is the proposal for the canopy design. So we would move forward with the canopies in the parking lot, but we would have to install improved or modernized pathway to the entrance of the school. The issue with that is that the projected cost is somewhere between $156,000 and $222,000. So in our projections, we used about $190,000, just because that's in the middle. Excuse me. The benefits of having this, aside from upgrading and kind of modernizing and making sure that that path of travel is compliant. The $200,000 cost would be rolled into the project. So we wouldn't have any upfront cost. It's just added and built into the long-term cost of the project. And so kind of understanding those pros and cons, we're seeking the board's direction on which option would be preferred.
A question, please. How will those long-term costs, what will fund the long-term costs?
So the way we purchase power, that the rate at the power that we purchase for that particular school would increase. So let's just say, okay, I'm going to use more terms that I had to learn what they mean. So 1 second. So there we go. So the power purchase agreement works by kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours is essentially what you would think about like miles per gallon. So the amount of kilowatt hours that we use would be the amount that we charge. So they would charge, say, 17 cents per kilowatt hour. If we didn't do the canopy, then we would pay something like 15 cents a kilowatt hour. So because the cost of the project goes up, then the rate that we pay per kilowatt hour also increases.
What do you anticipate will be the annual cost to TUSD from this project?
The annual cost for us would be $0 upfront, because we would actually be experiencing savings because we would be spending less with SoCal Edison and increasing our payment to Forefront Power, and then minimizing how much we pay SoCal Edison and experiencing savings.
But at some time, we have to pay.
No.
No, this is a free project?
It's certainly not free.
Okay, so I'm trying to get at what are the costs associated with the project at TUSD?
All right, so we will get there. Next slide, please. Here we go. So this is the table, and this is, and I know that this is a lot, so that's why, again, we wanted to give you guys enough information, time to digest it, ask your questions, and if it's something we can't answer, something that we can get a professional to answer. But essentially, the way it works is that you'll see the sites are listed, the rate per kilowatt hour, the size of the system, that just means how many panels. The production rate of those panels, the estimate of what we currently pay, how much we would save in the first year, and then how much we're projected to save over the life of the agreement, which is 20 years. The 20-year number, it's important to understand that those are long-term projections and not something that we can really quantify like accurately, right? How much is something going to cost 20 years from now? Anybody's guess, but it is the district's position that we anticipate those costs going up, which is why we want to move forward with this project to hedge those costs and kind of mitigate how much we spend in our reliance on SCE and their pricing. So if we were to move forward with just the ground mount at Golden Hills, that would result in a savings in the first year of $3,500 or $3,490. if we move forward with the canopy in the first year, we would not experience the savings. And we would not experience savings because of the significant additional cost to the project, specifically at Golden Hills. The benefits do come that it's a large project that would be good to undertake, but we don't necessarily have to upfront any money. It's just paid over time. So to put some of these rates into perspective, if you look at the PPA rate, we're talking about 16.38 cents per kilowatt hour. Currently, we pay our last bill, we were paying about 37 cents per kilowatt hour as a total. So we would still be experiencing savings based on like what we're paying now and what we would be paying in the future.
One more question. The construction costs are factored into the kilowatt hours?
The rate that they charge per kilowatt hour, yes.
Okay.
And so that's why it's difficult to be able to explain, because I imagine some of that calculation is proprietary for them. They tell us, okay, based on what these costs are in your project, this is what we charge per kilowatt hour. The thing, though, is that I can tell you how much we currently pay per kilowatt hour on average, and that is how we've been making our decision that this is something worth moving forward with. So it's kind of difficult to answer how much we would pay in the first year or every year if the canopy versus ground mount, or because it's just built into their rate. So we would be looking for, thank you. So we would be looking for your direction in terms of if you would like to pursue the canopy at Golden Hills or the ground mount option based on their individual pros and cons. We're also looking for a guidance on the changes to the rates. So our current agreement, the benefit of going through SPUR was that agreement already had a lot of restrictions that were to the benefit of the district. One of those being a sliding scale of what was the maximum that they could charge us. Unfortunately, since December 2020, a lot has changed. And so the company, Forefront Power, has asked for us if we would support an increase to the originally agreed upon price. After consulting with SPUR, they said that technically we are in agreement and that we can try to enforce it, but at the same time, that company does not have to move forward with our project. So in being a good partner, trying to make sure that the end goal of saving funds, really mitigating our reliance on SCE and the rates that they impose on us, this is something that we want to move forward with. One of the issues that we had with our project was that as soon as it was approved, January 1st, 2021, any ground mount at a school had to be DSA approved. Before, kind of the rule of thumb was if it was something over a kid's head, it would have to be DSA approved. These ground mounts are about 3-4 feet off the ground, but because that is the law, that is what they had to, our options became limited. So we approved this in December 2020, and it wasn't until November 2021 that a DSA pre-approved ground mount became available. So that's part of the reason for the delay, is a lot of not only the inspections and all the work that our facilities director, Mr. Kirk Gilbert, has done with their team and the architects, but it's just important to us that we do move forward with the project, considering that there have been changes, understanding that these changes are kind of outside of anyone's control, and that the district still will result in savings. So originally, our projected first year savings when we originally started in December 2020 was about $120,000. Now we're down to about $73,000 or $54,000, depending on the Golden Hills election. But we are still experiencing savings, and we certainly support this project to move forward. But again, it's at the direction of the board, and so we're seeking your guidance on how you would like us to proceed.
I have a comment. When I don't know if it's public comment first, President Weinstein or us now, or?
Go ahead, Trustee
Okay.
Napier.
So I actually do recall this item was on my very first meeting, and I was against it back then, and I'm still against it today. And our savings has dropped. You know, I grew up in this community, and I grew up at, I was about 2 years removed. If I'd have been a little older, I would have been at the old red schoolhouse on Pellicer in Cummings Valley. I moved, and when we moved here, I went to Cummings Valley Elementary, where it stands now, which was basically portable buildings out in the dirt in the field, right? So what I'm getting at is our district has evolved in the short time that I have been in this district as a student. And for all these locations, you know, the comment is, yeah, they're not used at this time. They're not being used. They're not being used. To me, a $73,000, even if it's $120,000 savings, again, collective, you're taking a large footprint, and I know it's a 20-25-year contract, but we all know in this world, those are forever. Once you kind of deem that property as solar or renewable energy and stuff like that, it's kind of done deal. I just think that's those savings, you know, you just think about Cummings Valley, 17,000, you know, JMS, you know, I look at Tompkins like, man, what an eyesore for those kids, you know, to be right under solar panels, right outside their classrooms. In addition to that, those houses that are right across the street. Same with Golden Hills. I mean, I just think those savings numbers are just not worth it. I mean, I know you won't know the number off the top of your head. Maybe you do because you're pretty dang smart at this stuff. You know, that $73,000 number, what is that in the overall percentage of our actual budget, right? It's pennies, right? To us as average working blue collar guy like myself, man, $73,000, man, that's a lot of money. But in our world, as a school district, you know, there's a lot more money coming in than that. And I recognize that the ever-changing power prices, we're all dealing with it on our utility bills on a daily basis, monthly basis here too. But I just think it would be bad planning on our part as a board to sacrifice small footprints of land that we have, specifically in places like Golden Hills Elementary. You're landlocked by houses and apartments. You're never expanding that facility. What the footprint you have is the footprint you have. You know, Tompkins has a little land around it. JMS is basically stuck now. THS, a little land around it, but again, we don't own that. We don't know for sure. I'm just always going to be in support of let's protect the land, especially on the facilities that we had. I know the school district years ago, you know, sold off a lot of properties around, you know, Stallion Springs way out there in Bear Valley. Those properties were kind of worthless to the district, and I know we talked about the Cherry Lane property and some of those, but this land that's, man, directly on our property, I will never support sacrificing land, you know, for $73,000 savings in overall budget. So, sorry for that.
No, I appreciate that. You know, we don't anticipate that everyone's going to love every idea that we bring. We certainly took those comments into consideration. I think we would just want to kind of provide that not just Tehachapi, but kind of California as a whole is experiencing declining enrollment. The facilities the way they are 10 years ago versus today, there's still capacity for more students. So in my opinion, and again, just an opinion, would be that by the expiration of this agreement, we would still be in a flexible position because we did want to make sure that Tompkins, you know, you're saying that Tompkins is going to have to, these kids are just going to be with like these ugly solar panels. And like, I agree, they're not cute, but one of the benefits is that it does provide shade to students in this really wide open area. And so they do have some benefits. In terms of like the ability to expand on our campuses, Golden Hills has some room for additional classrooms on that western side. I would say aside from Tompkins, the district does benefit from having a lot of property. But I certainly understand the consideration for the future, kind of making sure that we're moving, you know, taking the right steps and considering that there will be growth, right? Tehachapi continues to expand, even though our enrollment might not should reflect that yet, but you know, things can change 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But that's just kind of our position, is that the enrollment and the capacity of the schools is still in a place that this would not impact our ability to grow. At least not. in
I
the
think growth
immediate
is not
future.
necessarily, excuse me, not necessarily the main factor, in my opinion. Look at the sixth grade center at JMS. That was an upgrade because we had trash portable facilities that hopefully someday we'll tear those down and do something else out there too. So it was a repurposing property because we had aging, failing infrastructure. So, and we are evolving as a district too, right? We have the TILA program, we're taking over that campus. So there's different uses to just because we're not growing doesn't mean there wouldn't be a better use of the facilities, again, for $73,000 a year. And again, in the government world, that just feels like money that just kind of falls into the general fund, right? I work for the government, so I get it. It just kind of like fades off in the sunset. You always hear that talk, well, that tax or that savings just going to kind of fade away. Yes, could $73,000 do a lot for our community and our kids? I agree. But I think we just need to look at the bigger picture as a whole as long-term planning for property for our kids, so.
Okay, that's okay. This is an information item, but any other questions or comments from the board?
Kelly does. So, Mr.
Go ahead.
Intezari, now that we are aware of the ADA ramp for Golden Hills, what other items, if we were to, let's say, install portables, or if we were to do remodeling without changing the overall structure, what would cause us to have to, which you probably do it anyway, but what else would cause us to have to put that in sooner versus later?
That is an excellent question. That might be outside of my kind of scope for specifics, but just in generally speaking, anything beyond repairs, anything that you would call a repair. So if you are constructing something, then the kind of the campus as a whole, the DSA would be expecting that the path of travel be up to the current code. So yes, anything beyond repairs is the
So-
general rule.
And once again, I'm not going to hold this to you because you don't know, because we haven't explored it, right? But even the addition of one portable may have to include that walkway.
I don't believe, I think it really depends on where it is, and the rules with portables are a bit unique. So I'd have to look into that for you.
Would you mind bringing that information back?
Not a problem.
If we don't make a decision on this today, would you mind bringing that back?
Well, it's certainly an informational item, so, yes, this is
Thank you.
kind of the purpose is that there's technical questions and a lot of like consideration for more than just the project itself, and so completely understand.
So just to clarify, Trustee Kelly, your question is regarding if a portable is added as to whether or not there would need to be DSA approval?
No, if the, let's call it the ADA walkway would have to be installed. So, yeah, I guess it is the DSA, yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, because the intention was to bring this as an information item tonight and then bring it back in November because of the scope is so huge of this project, right? Bring it back to the board in November so that we have time to gather that information and questions before asking the board to take a vote on it. Thank you.
That's why I'm keep clarifying, does he have any questions? Because now is the time for questions. Trustee Kermode, please.
Mr. Intezari, the chart we're seeing there, obviously that includes the cost increase to do the canopy at Golden Hills. Does it include the rate increase that's been proposed by the contractor?
Yes. So for the ground mount, the PPA would be 17 cents, and with the canopy, it would go up to about 25 cents.
Okay, but I get that, but the cost of the delay, where they're wanting to raise their overall cost of the construction, is that included in this? I thought that's what you were saying, that the company that's going to do the install wants to increase their price. We've been told technically we have a contract, we don't have to go along with the price increase, but if we don't go with the price increase, they may walk away from the contract. So I was asking if that proposed price increase is included in this chart.
Yes, this is this is all inclusive with the new rates the way they would be, not the old rates.
So as best as we can guess, based upon the increasing energy costs, we're still looking at a proposed either $8 million over 20 years in savings versus the 7,600 if we go with the canopy.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have one question. Are the rates based on usage, or is there a minimum number of kilowatts? Is it based just on usage, or is there a minimum if the district doesn't meet that?
So the contract does require that we purchase 100% of the energy that is produced. It also includes requirements that, but it cannot exceed 110%. So it does have kind of some boundaries for us. That's the benefit of using this spur agreement. So sorry, you had a second part to your question?
I just wanted to know whether there was a minimum or was this based upon usage?
So the usage is estimated in the initial agreement, so that's not included on here. But so the agreement would essentially say something along the lines of, let's say, so if you look at this year one production number, okay. So in our initial agreement, that is already stipulated as the amount that they need to at least produce 95% of this much usage. We have to buy 100% of the usage, but it cannot exceed 110%. So there are some boundaries as to how much of our exposure is. There's a minimum and then there's a maximum.
If we don't buy the required 100%, do we owe what we don't buy? Say we only use 80% of the 100%. Are we on the hook for the whole 100%?
Technically you would, but the usage that is produced, the panels are designed, it's not, the whole plan is designed based on the amount of usage that Golden Hills or Tehachapi High School would be expected to have. Also, it's important to understand that these degrade over time. So the minimum amount that those are supposed to produce decreases over time. So there's kind of these triggers for us to make sure that the district is protected. We do have to buy the power that generates, but there's a cap, right, so that we don't have too much exposure. But there is also a minimum requirement that those are supposed to produce to meet the needs of each individual site's energy like needs and demands.
Okay, any more discussion or comments on this information item?
Do you have to do all of the schools? Could you just do the high school?
So these have all, when we agreed, when we executed the agreement for December 2020, we have submitted all of these plans. We've agreed to move forward with all of the individual sites. The only design plans that have not been completed is Golden Hills, because we have this big kind of hurdle that, do we want to do something that's for the long term but more expensive, or that's economical and easier. But the rest of the plans have been submitted, and our agreement does require that we proceed unless there's something like force majeure outside of anyone's control.
Well, I'm glad it's informational because, we can get out there and take a look and ask our voters and things like that. Because it's not just about me, it's about the people that live around the areas and things like that. So I think we need to do our homework a little bit as trustees. Thanks.
And you guys are welcome to submit your questions. I believe the board can submit questions to Ms. Adalia Amaker. And so if it doesn't just have to be your questions today. The more you think of, the more we can relay to the company or give us the opportunity to kind of, because the answers can be simple, or I understand that they might be complicated. And we certainly invite you to ask all the questions to make you feel comfortable with kind of this big project and this decision.
Okay, we had a couple more questions, so Trustee Kermode?
I don't see her here. I think she's left for this evening, but has the school itself expressed a preference for one plan or the other at Golden Hills?
I am not sure. I will have to follow up with our facilities director.
Okay, thank you.
And Trustee Kelly.
Have you heard of any legal action against Spur or any of the school districts or any forefront, anything that would say that this is not a good long-term investment?
I have not.
Thank you.
It is my understanding that this was something that the district had been looking to do for quite some time, that there were multiple proposals, and that this was the first one that kind of made sense, especially considering that there would be savings in the first year. And although maybe the savings in the first year represent like 0.25% of our budget, I think it's kind of important to understand that that does grow over time. But I also want to be sensitive to people's understanding that this is, their home, their schools, and that it's not just about saving money. So we completely understand and respect the positions of our members.
Okay, final comments. This is an informational item only. So-
public comments earlier, you went to the board.
Okay, public comments. Go ahead, Mr. Kaminsky.
Just a comment. If you approve this, my comment is input on the Golden Hills choice. Having been there 11 years as a teacher and 1 year as a vice principal, where the ground mounts are being proposed, that would be good use of land that is never used. Trustee Wallach was taught there as well. And with all the issues with ADA, with the parking lot, I would definitely go with the ground mount on that northwest side. And if the trees, I know 2 teachers that are no longer with the district. One lives in Wyoming, the other one lives in Nebraska. Any trees they planted, I'm sure they're fine with if they're moved. The southwest parking lot, or that area between the parking lot and the corner of Madre and Park, could use some more trees. So that's my input. Thank you.
Okay, additional, Mr. Lowe?
So the last time these proposals came up, I wasn't the administrator yet, so I did share my concerns and suggestions with my administrator, so they may have already been addressed and found infeasible, but I'd like to share them now, because if I don't speak now, I figure I don't. For the JMS site, I'm concerned about the use of what I consider to be prime real estate, although fallow at the moment, along Anita Drive. I think that's a good place for future expansion. I also am concerned about the good neighbor aspect of having the ground mounts facing right across the street to the houses that are right there. I don't know if there's a reflection that comes off of them that's going to affect those houses or not, but it's something I'm concerned about. My suggestion that I brought up to my administrator in the past was that if we wanted to use canopy, which I understand is more expensive, but canopy over the parking lot that's between the Dynauditorium and the current the tech blockhouse, that would still be using a parking lot as a parking lot, but also offers shade and element, protection from the cars that are parked there. It also looked like on that overhead view of JMS, if I was looking at it correctly, thank you, sir, that the route that the tie-in is going to need to go to is a long way through our campus, and if we're over on the other side, I think it'd be a quicker route. Maybe there's other stuff there that's in the way. I don't know. But in any case, I just wanted to bring up my suggestion that area right there at the corner of Anita is a pretty nice spot for the future if we want to build. And there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Yes, sir.
I have some weird questions. So,
Can you start out by, state your name, please?
Nick Tanaka. My question has to do with the way that they're going to be pricing per kilowatt hour. Is it based on what the going rate is, or do we get to kind of finagle with them and cap how much their increases are year on year? The only reason I mention this is that might be a way for us to maybe get more savings out of it, being able to say, hey, we only want to have a 2, 3, or 4% increase year on year in comparison to maybe SCE doing like, a 5 or a 6% increase. I don't know how power works. So that's my question there. Then the other question was, do we have minimum requirements from SCE for us pulling power from them? I know that we don't have a minimum, but we do need to be connected to them, correct? Okay, cool. All right. And my other question got answered. So awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Antazari, for that. Moving on, we have a resolution, number 02, October 22nd, participation in Eastern Kern Air Pollution Control District, DMV AB 923 funds. Mr. Antazari.
Thank you, President Weinstein. 1 second while I find my notes. So in order to support increased ridership, the district would like to purchase an additional bus or buses, 1, 2, or 3, through the Eastern Kern Air Pollution Control District's bus replacement program. This is something that has been used by the district office to replace older buses. Essentially, if we scrap a qualifying bus, I think it's being more than 10 years old, we would receive $110,000. A new bus costs about $195,000. So while it does create a cost for the district, last year the board had approved that we purchase 2 buses instead of the normal 1 replacement, and we had delayed the scrapping of the bus in order to keep them as spares, in order to maximize the amount of routes that we can offer. This is something that we'd like to try to do again. It does have its logistical challenges, but as we speak to the transportation department, they are concerned that their favorite type of bus make and model is no longer going to be made available. This rear engine type of bus is uniquely preferred in Tehachapi due to our elevation. So we're requesting the board's approval to seek another purchase of more than 1 bus as part of the replacement program. So we have 3 buses that we have identified that could use replacement, especially considering that certain laws are changing. Now buses, they will all require seat belts. I don't recall the exact year, but it's something that, given that the type of bus that we're set up to repair and matches the rest of our fleet is going to expire, and some of these buses already need replacement, and just kind of in consideration of the fact that things seem to get more and more expensive as things go, as time goes on, we are seeking the board's approval to move forward with participation in the Eastern Kern Air Pollution Control District bus replacement program. We understand that this is an additional cost, but we do feel that this would benefit our students by being able to have more buses. Now, if only we could find more drivers, but we are working on it. But at least this would provide multiple benefits to the district. Consistency with the buses that we work on and are better suited for this environment. Just kind of knocking out some of these large purchases and getting them out of the way, and also avoiding having to have a bus that is no longer compliant and not being able to be used. Because we had participated in the program last year and bought 2 buses instead of the normal 1, we did not budget for an additional bus this year, but based on everything that's going on with transportation, we're seeking the board's approval to participate in the bus replacement program, potentially with up to 3 buses. if the board is comfortable with such an investment. The net cost to us would be about $86,000 per bus after the rebate, after the $110,000. So we're talking about around $250,000 investment for 3 buses. So we seek your passing of this resolution to participate in the program.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments from the board? Trustee Kelly?
So up to 3 buses, roughly $250,000. They're safer buses, they're more efficient, and you believe we have the money in the budget?
Yes. Primarily, it's that this is going to be a cost that we're going to have to experience one way or the other. So in my opinion, I would prefer to purchase now just because we know it's something that we're going to need. We are in a position to be able to do so, and given the high demand for transportation now with rising costs and people working remotely, we just know that there's a high demand for it. So to kind of implement the same plan that we did last year of having the new buses rolling and the spares just sitting there just in case we need them, and then at the end of the year scrapping them, to try to implement that program again, at least to be able to meet the demand. So it's kind of, while it is, do we have $250,000? Yes. Do we have people that need transportation? Yes. Is it an additional cost? Yes. And so in that kind of consideration for the long term, it's just more about understanding the board's position in terms of, because this is a change from how it was done before. Before it was 1 new bus every year. But because we are in a better financial position, it's something that I do believe we can afford pretty easily. Just more so what this means maybe in implications for the future. Does the board want us to move forward with these but slow down on purchasing in future years? Is it okay to move forward with the program the way it is? Kind of play by ear based on the financial situation of the school district year by year. I think it's just kind of, because this is a consistent annual thing that was being done, but we're doing something a little bit different. We would just want to make sure that it is okay with the board, because it is an investment in our community.
Thank you.
Trustee Commode, I think you had a question next? No, Trustee Waller.
My only concern, I understand the need for buses, I really do. But my only concern is your comment made a couple board meetings ago that in 2 to 3 years, we're going to probably be in the red. I would think we'd be more prudent with our expenditures, saving for a rainy day if we can.
We certainly take those kinds of things into consideration. We know because 85% of our expenses are salaries and benefits related, this is not a material impact on the long term of our plans and our, if we have an additional $250,000 spent this year, I think it would provide a strong benefit to our community. If there was, and that's kind of why we're looking for direction, because if there is consideration for fiscal prudence, then we would ask that maybe we delay purchasing new buses in out years and maybe get back on a 1-to-1 replacement plan. But I think that was in the context of salaries and benefits. Another issue is that the state has kind of made it difficult because normally your revenues, you want your revenues to match your expenses every year, right? And sometimes they're a little higher, a little low, but because we've had large investments, we anticipate these block grants. We almost have to deficit spend in order to spend them, because otherwise we would just be sitting on a higher fund balance. And so that's kind of the intent, is to use these funds for our community and for the benefit of our students. But you are correct that there are in our future projections, whether it's if we get full COLA, some COLA, no COLA, we do in any of those situations end up in a good financial place. So, but for me, although I am always looking to be fiscally prudent, I do think that we're supposed to be putting our resources forward for our students, and this is just trying to meet a demand of our community.
Yeah, considering your statement of fiscal prudence, you mentioned there was options regarding the bus purchases. Your recommendation is to go forward now?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Antazari. At this time, we are going to take a short 8-minute break. It is 8:13. Oh, excuse me, I forgot we had to actually vote on something first. Okay, do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? This was a roll call vote. Sorry, Ms. Amaker, can you take us back to roll call vote?
President Weinstein,
Aye.
Vice President Wallach,
Aye.
Clerk Wood,
Aye.
Trustee Kelly,
Aye.
Trustee Kermode,
Aye.
Trustee Napier,
Aye.
Trustee Scott.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Now we can take that well-deserved break. At 8:14 PM.
thanking them with the PowerPoint.
Okay, everyone, if you could make your way to your seats, please. Okay, everyone. Back to open session at 8:30 PM. And Mr. Antazari. First item is approval of agreement between Dynamic Therapy Solutions and Tehachapi Unified School District for a particular student.
Thank you, President Weinstein. Dynamic Therapy Solutions will conduct augmentative and alternative communication as part of an independent education evaluation, as well as staff parent training for a particular student. The cost of the agreement will not exceed $3,876 and covered by the budget allocated to special education for professional services. The services are to be completed by the end of the extended school year in July 2023. We seek your approval for this agreement.
Questions or comments from the board? Any public comment to this item? Do I have a motion to approve the agreement between Dynamic Therapy Solutions and TUSD?
I'll make the motion.
Kelly, a second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of declaring certain district property as surplus or obsolete.
Thank you, President Weinstein. Tompkins would like to request that obsolete and broken items that were listed, primarily consisting of broken chairs, cabinets, carts, and tables, be removed and properly disposed of as they don't have any value. We seek your approval to deem these items surplus.
Questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve certain district property as surplus and obsolete?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Roll call vote.
Aye. Oh, roll call vote. Boy, I'm never going to get that right tonight. It's not in my head.
President Weinstein,
Aye.
Vice President Wallach,
Aye.
Clerk Wood,
Aye.
Trustee Kelly,
Aye.
Trustee Kermode,
Aye.
Trustee Napier,
Aye.
Trustee Scott.
Aye.
Motion carries. And thank you, Mr. Antazari. Let's move on to instructional services. Welcome, Mrs. Paxton.
Good evening.
Information item, the Williams Complaint Quarterly Report.
All right, California Code of Regulations requires the Williams Complaint Report to be provided to the board on a quarterly basis, and there were no Williams complaints filed for the period of July 1st through September 30th, 2022.
Any questions or comments from the board? From the public? Thank you. Moving on. Another information item, which is Interdistrict Attendance Request Report.
So Education Code 48313 requires school districts to keep records of all inter-district transfer requests and report to the board the status of those requests. A report has been attached to the board agenda. The report provides information of the number of students who were granted an inter-district transfer for the 22-23 school year, which was 14 students, the number of transfers denied with the rationale for the denial, and then the number of students who reside within the boundaries of Tehachapi Unified but attend a school in another district, which was 3. Information about each specific student who was granted an inter-district transfer has been provided, along with the home district that they came from.
And then for the students that left TUSD, we provided the rationale as well.
Any questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, moving on. Approval of consolidated application for the 2022-2023 school year.
The consolidated application is a twice annual process. The district submits data and fiscal reports to California Department of Education for federally funded programs, including Title I, II, III, and IV. This application must be approved by the board prior to its submittal.
Okay, any comments or questions on this item from the board? Any public questions or comments? Do I have a motion to approve the application?
Kelly, I make the motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is a public hearing regarding sufficiency of instructional materials. Public hearing adoption of resolution number October 3rd, 22, authorizing the district superintendent to provide the required statements of assurance to the California Department of Education that for the 2022-2023 fiscal year, all mandates of Education Code Section 60119 and AB 831 have been met. The regular meeting is adjourned to hold a public hearing to obtain public input regarding the adoption of resolution number 03 October 22 at 8:36 p.m. Are there any public comments on this item? Any discussion from the board? The public hearing is adjourned at 8:37 p.m. and the regular meeting is reconvened. Next item is adoption of resolution number 03 October 22, sufficiency of instructional materials.
All right, pursuant to Education Code 60119 and AB 831, the governing board shall hold a public hearing regarding the sufficiency of instructional materials and shall make a determination through a resolution as to whether each pupil in each school in the school district has sufficient textbooks or instructional materials, or both that are aligned to content standards adopted. And we do have those at each site.
Okay, this will be a roll call vote. Is there any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Do I have a motion to adopt resolution number 03, October 22, sufficiency of instructional materials?
Kelly, I make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please, Ms. Amaker.
President Weinstein?
Aye.
Vice President Wallach?
Aye.
Clerk Wood?
Aye.
Trustee Kelly?
Aye.
Trustee Commode?
Aye.
Trustee Napier?
Aye.
Trustee Scott?
Aye.
Next item is approval of Earth Science textbook for the Tehachapi High School.
Okay, members of the Tehachapi High School teaching staff have reviewed and recommended for adoption the textbook for the Earth Science course. The title of the text is Earth Science by authors Edward Tarbuck and Frederick Lutkins, which is published by Savas Learning Company. The board previously approved the 30-day public review of these textbooks on June 14th, 2022. The 30-day public review has passed and there were no public comments. Mr. Gatmeyer, the Earth Science teacher at Tehachapi High School, presented the textbook at the Citizens Task Force meeting held on September 27th, 2022.
Any questions or comments from the board on this item? Any public comments? Do I have a motion to approve the Earth Science textbook for the Tehachapi High School?
I'll make the motion.
Kelly, a second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Paxton. Moving on to the personnel and welcoming Dr. Romero.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So you have in front of you or attached a first read job description for a potential project manager for the Maintenance Operations and Facilities Department. The Maintenance and Operations Department would like to add the project manager for Maintenance Operations and Facilities position to provide support to custodial, groundskeeping, and maintenance functions in technical areas such as the monitoring and maintenance of district access controls related to security, ventilation, and irrigation systems. Also, by adding this support, we will be better able to ensure consistency throughout the district in regard to health and safety by providing training and monitoring best safety practices. In addition, some key duties that would be included in the project manager would be the helping with monitoring and prioritizing incoming work orders, supporting principals and administration with oversight of custodians in relation to the technical areas of those assignments, and coordinating, scheduling, and supporting department work order projects within and with outside vendors. The position will be an added benefit to the organizational restructuring that was approved by the board on September 13th, 2022, which transitions the school custodians to the general supervision and evaluation of school site administrators and designates a stipend position of site lead custodians at each school. For many years, TUSD has staffed M&O with a maintenance supervisor. Currently, the maintenance supervisor position is vacant. It is the district's intention to complete the job description approval process for the project manager and then to staff that position in replacement of the maintenance and operations supervisor.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Are there comments or questions from the board on this? It's a first read.
I have a comment. I think this is a great step in the direction for facilities, something I'm obviously passionate about. So I think this will be a huge piece of support for Mr. Gilbert and his team. So I think this would be great. I'm excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trustee Napier.
Any other questions or comments? From the public?
Bless you.
It says first read, but is there a vote?
There is no vote.
Are we allowed to just pass it now? Do we have to wait?
We do have to wait because the way that it was listed on the
Okay.
agenda was as a first read. It was not listed as an action item.
Okay.
Okay. Next item is approval of revised custodial job description.
Bless you. The current job description that was dated December 2003 is being presented with recommended updates to reflect standard practices about safety regulations. The district worked with functional ergonomics to perform a job task analysis and determine revisions to the current job descriptions, in particular the qualifications where in need based on environmental factors and physical demands of the position. The methodology for documentation consisted of an on-site visit using various measuring devices such as dynamometers, scales, and tape measures. Observation of job tasks and interviews with employees and managers were also conducted. The job description was also evaluated to ensure the duties listed still apply. A first read of this item was presented to the board in September 2022.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve the revised custodial job description?
I'll make the motion.
Kelly, a second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Approval ratification of the certificated personnel report.
Thank you, President Weinstein. This month's certificated report includes the hiring of 3 open certificated positions and 3 confidential management positions for the 22-23 school year. In addition, the report includes 26 extra duty assignments, 16 certificated stipends in 1 prep period, and 1 column change. The report also shows the hiring of 6 additional substitutes. Lastly, it includes the resignations of 2 employees.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board on the report?
I just need to make sure that I don't, or I do need to recluse myself, which I don't think I have to, but I just want to verify.
I don't think you need to recuse yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve, ratify the certificated personnel report?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is approval, ratification of the classified personnel report.
Thank you, President Weinstein. This month's classified report includes the staffing of 12 open positions and 2 coaching positions. There were 7 classified changes in assignments. Lastly, there were 6 resignations, 1 due to a new position that an employee took.
Any questions or comments on the report from the board? Any comments, questions from the public? Do I have a motion to approve, ratify the classified personnel report?
So moved.
Kelly, a second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item up is approval of a variable term waiver for single subject teacher and confidential management.
Thank you, President Weinstein. The California Commission on Teacher Credentialing has the authority to issue variable term waiver documents to allow certificated candidates additional time to complete requirements for educator preparation and credentialing as outlined in Education Code Section 44225, Subdivision M, Subsection 2. Variable term waivers are issued or denied based upon the requirements outlined in Title V, California Code of Regulations, Sections 80120 to 80125. The district has submitted a board-approved declaration of need on file with the California Department of Education and has made reasonable efforts to recruit certificated teachers and has followed the hierarchy of hierarchy. The variable term waivers will support 1 teacher position and 2 confidential management positions. 1 listed for Sharon Salyer, single subject English teacher at Tehachapi High School, Elizabeth Spoden, vice principal at Golden Hills Elementary, and Christy Fiskus, learning director at Tompkins Elementary.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments on this item from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve the variable term waiver for single subject teacher and confidential management?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Okay, as we finish up open session, I'm going to turn it back over to the superintendent for a launch for us.
Yes, and we're going to tag team it here. If you recall, you heard in the Golden Hills presentation this evening that a launch is a very important component of capturing kids' hearts and the strategies that we're implementing. We are encouraging our teachers to end every class period, whether it's an elementary class or a secondary class, on a positive note. And that's how we launch our students on positively to the rest of their day, with energy, enthusiasm, and hope. And tonight, to close out our meeting and send us off in a positive way, I think we can all use it. Maybe there's a hooray in there somewhere. But we have Mr. Eric Lowe from JMS, and he has this evening's launch to present.
That I do. So here in Tehachapi, we're lucky enough to have a national park unit nearby. And so the Cesar E. Chavez National Monument had their 10th anniversary this weekend. So I'm going to share a quote from Cesar Chavez that I believe, and I'm going to let you chew on it as you go home today. So the quote is, "Real education should consist of drawing the goodness and the best out of our own students. What better books can there be than the book of humanity?" So thank you for your moment, and I hope that you're able to think about that a little bit. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Yay! Hooray! There being no further business to come before the board, the meeting is adjourned at approximately 8:50 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.